So, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. I have a in studio guest, Nate Rozeveld. I had to clean up my house. Like, this is as clean as my studio gets. So, take a look around. Yeah, yeah. My wife's like, "What? Somebody's coming over?" I'm like, "The house is fine. It's fine."
Oh yeah.
So,
why is that a thing? Like, is it just because my wife does the same thing anytime an in studio guest? Oh my gosh. I'm like, literally open the door, say what's up, right into the room, check all the mounts, we're gonna talk, and then we leave. Like, there's no time spent in the house.
It's not like, oh yeah, like, oh my god, I can't believe they didn't clean off their baseboards. Like, that's crazy.
I'm so focused on that. Yeah.
So this is the second one that we've done in person, so that's good. He didn't invite me over to his house when I was on his podcast, so I don't know what's going on there. Probably the cleanliness factor.
Yeah.
But so Nate, he got your I've given Nate so much crap because it's all like 4-year-old bucks, 5-year-old bucks, like week twos, and I bring them into the den of 2-year-olds here in the studio, and it's like, oh yeah, this is a nice one. But you got out and we talked before, and you said I ran you through the gauntlet for like passing bucks and all this, like, I don't know what I would call it, like private land privilege type stuff. But you went out and you shot your first deer on public, your first deer out of state, like, lots of different things. And I must say that I'm like, we're going to go through the story and like the thought process and kind of like everything. But I'm like somewhat conflicted, right? And if I was a listener to the show, I might be like wondering like, what in the world is up with this guy, meaning me? Because, I had Josh on, and we were talking about antler point restrictions and like the state of Michigan. And then I have like guys on like you and like Byron, and these guys are like advocating like, oh, I need to shoot this class of buck and this class of buck. And then next thing you know, Byron shoots a 6-point or a big 4 or whatever it was for points. And then you shoot a buck that's like, I don't know if I want to shoot him. Then I got excited. So it's like, I don't know if I'm like influencing people like positively or like negatively for the sport. So like for you going out of state, like, let's talk about that trip and like your expectations and like your history going out of state, because it's just absurd to me. But like, we'll get into that.
Yeah, I mean, for us, having the relationship we've had the last couple months, we got to share hunt camp, earlier this year, and the gauntlet you ran me through, which I was totally prepared for. But I guess my journey on out-of-state hunting, we can kind of just start there. I've been doing that since I was in my early 20s with my dad. So I think this was either my 13th or 14th trip out of state. And as a whole, we've always just bounced all over, like been in Kentucky, Illinois, Missouri, blah, 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 do all that stuff. And we kind of started, our first trip was in Kentucky, and that was all public land. Just went with a buddy that had been down there a few times. We camped, did all that stuff. But then we had a lot of fun. And then kind of a couple years later, we would do like the semi-guided version where my dad would do a bunch of research, find a guy that was like willing to say, hey, yeah, you can hunt this for the week and do whatever you want. Because kind of in that time frame, it was really hard to find that. Like it was either like fully guided, you have to sit in these ladder stands, and then that's what you do. We never really had that much of a desire to do it that way. So we would find guys that would have, anywhere from 60 acres to 280 acres. And we did that for a couple of years. Probably like 3 years we did that, and then we essentially were like, this isn't really that much fun. And in mixed in those years, we would do the public land thing too. And then essentially kind of came to the conclusion that we don't need to do this semi-guided stuff. We're just gonna go to public land and just kind of continue to bounce around. Did a lease 1 year out of state, didn't really enjoy that at all. Never even hunted it, just hunted the public around it. That's kind of where I've been, and a lot of good experiences, typically going those best time of year, November, your typical rutcation hunt, and lots of miles, but no, I had shot at one deer and all those times I've been there, and he was, I hit him too high, didn't find him. I was probably like 23 to 25, somewhere in there. Other than that, very, very minimal shots. I guess I had opportunities at deer, but just not what I was looking for, and always, saw a really nice deer and just kind of was like, I'm not shooting anything except for that. So that was kind of my experience for out-of-state hunting.
So it's crazy. Your wife must be like a saint, because it's like, oh, you just went on and took your bow for a hike again. Like, oh, yeah, we can't all be hunters.
Hey,
so gotta be some gatherers.
I'm pretty lucky in my wife. She understands the process. She grew up. We grew up together, kind of like we've been dating since high school, and she was never a hunter. And we hunted a lot in high school, and before we got married, in the first few years we're married, since my son's been born, she doesn't bow hunt as much anymore. But so she came along with me and kind of was there step by step in that whole journey of me just trying to kill a deer to it's a buck, holy cow, shoot it, to I'm thinking I'm gonna pass some deer, to like now where I'm at now. So she was kind of through that whole journey, and she gets enjoyment out of that. So she understands if I don't come home with something. So I don't think my self-worth is not based on me.
I know, but 15 years, man.
It's a long time.
It's an eternity.
I did shoot 2 deer in Iowa with a gun in between there. So, but that was private land. That was, a little different experience. That's deer park fun land, essentially, doing that.
So, in this time, is your dad shooting deer down there?
My dad's only shot 1, but for the most part, we were on the same page. Like, I guess it's, if you take a couple steps back, growing up in Michigan, hunting the way we hunted, lots of deer, but never anything big for a long time. So when we first went out of state, it was because we were seeking that next age class deer. And we were and every time we'd go, we'd always leave early and do like some driving around, and we'd see these giant deer like around, like I'm talking giant, it'd be like 140 plus, like to us. So we're here to shoot something like that. That was kind of always our thing. And if we got to hunt 5 to 8 days, and just to have the potential for one to walk by, we'll let those littler deer go just because we wanted to get that experience. So from the jump, we were very picky, and some could argue like you too picky, but we also had a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and a lot of those opportunities that I watched deer work through the landscape, I came back to Michigan and started hunting that way, and that kind of led to some of the success I've had in Michigan too.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna ask is for most people, you're going down there like myself, and it's like, I guess I'm looking for that next age class deer. I'm looking for, kind of what, I don't want to say like what you see on TV, because that's not realistic to me, but like a lot of these guys like YouTube, like these videos that you see on Instagram and stuff like that, and you're like, man, what state was that? What was that? Where was that? And if you're not getting it in Michigan, and I really believe like not just me, but I think a lot of people in general, we hunt a certain way when we're home, and then we go out of state and go balls to the wall because we are having this little bit of timetable, And so it's interesting to hear you talk about it like that, because it's like I've seen like we were just on one of the properties that you hunt, and it's like manicured, everything that you would want. It's one of those places like a public land guy would drive by and go like, oh my God, I bet there's deer in there. It must be nice, all this stuff. So to go from that to out of state, I can see where it's different, because for a guy like myself, or I would say maybe the general public who doesn't have a bunch of farms to hunt, or a bunch of ag or big food plots or anything like that, you're like, well, I'm going to go down there and get into bigger bucks or things like that, better pieces of public, less pressure, some things like that. But for you, it's like, if you're, what did you see, $6 this morning, you said?
Yeah, $6.
Yeah, so you're there's $6. We gotta go to Kansas to try and see something to shoot. God, there's nothing around here. You see how that?
Yeah, 100%. I don't want anyone to think that I don't have it good in Michigan. I do. I've been blessed to grow up in a hunting community, our hunting family, with some great private pieces, and then Seeing lots of deer has never been. I always feel for those guys. You know, you start seeing those kind of pop up now on social media. I've hunted, you know, all rifle season. I saw one doe fawn, or I've seen one spike, and really, you know, I kind of feel for those guys because that, fortunately, very, very early on in my hunting career, like it was like we're gonna see deer. Like if a doe tags in my pocket, like I'm shooting a doe. Like it might not be the first day, but in that trip or in that season, like I will be able to punch a tag. So I can't relate. I can understand, but I can't relate to that. So for me, it's always been a blessing to see deer, and then it just became morphed into me trying to do the next thing. Like, okay, so and so down the road shot one of those deer. Why, if he can do it, I can do it. Or you know, other guys in Michigan. So like that's kind of where my game kind of morphed into that. And then you know, when we went out of state at that time, I didn't really knock on door permission like I have done now. It was kind of like when we started going out of state hunting, that's when like the trajectory of us trying to get like age class of deer like change. My dad and you know uncle had done, like you've talked about this in the UP, self-inflicted, you know, APR, like you can't shoot anything unless it's got 4 on the side. It actually used to be spikes and 4-bys. That was like somebody shot every spike that moved. But you know that there wasn't much success and turnover, because then as soon as a 2-year-old 8-point showed up, like wiped off the face of the earth. Like everyone would do that. So then it's like, well, this isn't really working. So like at the time, our mindset was changing. We started going out of state, and then we started realizing what other people were doing or how things are operating, and we kind of took that mindset back to Michigan, and really have seen an increase in age class. Like that was the biggest problem, is age class, and that came from trigger control. So yeah, like for me, like this morning, what is it, December 18th, it's the first time I've hunted since I got back from Kansas. So December 1st was when I shot my Kansas deer, and strictly just because I'm waiting. I did an observation set to see what was going on. I'm like, yeah, there's 6 bucks that came through, and which is pretty cool. But you know, there was one maybe 2-year-old, the rest are 1.5 year olds, and it was fun to see that. But like that's on a piece of property that no one's been there since like my brother-in-law shot a buck, like I don't know, Thanksgiving time, maybe a little bit before that. So like obviously they're all herded up there because there's ag around. It's, you know, got the right cover, all those things. So yeah, that's I don't really know how to I just got lucky, I guess, with that property or other properties, but it's taken a lot of effort to find those properties and then know how to hunt them correctly too.
So like when you, like this year when you went to Kansas, like you went with a big group of guys and you guys had a bunch of success. Like what was your, because I feel like it changed a little bit, but like when you went down there, like the first time, when you guys set off and like during the hunt, what was the like, what were the goals or mindsets, you know? Because like I know a lot of guys that are like great hunters and shoot big deer, and they're like out of state, and I talked about it with Josh, like 120 class deer, like this buck I killed in Kansas. It was like that, and you've seen like my wall, so it's like I got a lot of space for 100-inch bucks, like until I'm full, like, you know, we're gonna fill it up. But like, so what was the goal like for the camp going down there, and like your kind of like goals or like plan?
So we went with 6 guys. It was me and 5 other guys. We had hunted, the first time that group had hunted together was the year prior in Illinois, when we hunted Southern Illinois. I would say expectation wise, I probably had like the highest like goal, like as in like it's 4-year-old or older kind of a thing. My buddy Drew, who ended up shooting a deer, he kind of has like a moving scale goal. So like if the first day he isn't shooting a 120, but then by day 3 or 4 or 5, like better watch out, if 120 walks by, he'll shoot it. So he's the guy that would pass a deer on the first day, but he would shoot it on the last day, kind of a thing. So, and then a couple of other guys right in that, like, yeah, Pope and Young class, I think the majority of them would shoot a Pope and Young deer if it walked by. But we're all different stages of walks too. So like, some of those guys don't have much of an archery wall per se. They're seeking that because they don't really have a good property to hunt in Michigan, but they also are not looking for the, you know, 1.5 or 2.5-year-old deer. They're kind of there for the experience. So mindset wise, I think that's kind of, we're not all like it's not like, oh, it's if you're a part of this camp, you can only shoot a mature 5.5-year-old buck. By no means is that, but we all are very like mindset focused of trying to find that mature deer, and like that's like we go into it like looking for those older age class deer, and then have some good hunts, and there are deer that get passed, and then there are opportunities that are missed, and all that stuff, just like a typical good group of guys would be.
Well, but I mean, I feel like that's, I don't want to say like important, but it could be like a major factor, because if like, and it's strange for me because it's like I'm a guy that kind of like I want to do it myself, like kind of type, and I don't know. I think you kind of can go back and forth on that, because when you're hunting with a group, like who's going here, it's usually 2 guys to a truck. So, but if the guy that's in your truck is like, I'm gonna shoot 120 and you're passing them up, then it's, you could be like, okay, well, come over here and shoot these deer. I'm gonna go look for something else. Or you could be like, this is a good spot. I'm seeing all these deer. They're just not big enough, so I'm gonna sit here and wait and screw your buddy over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not like that. You found the spot or whatever.
Yeah, but there is like a team dynamic to it, and that exact scenario is what happened on the first trip to Kansas. I was with a guy who has, he's awesome. We hunted with each other last year. We kind of, teamed up last year as well, and he hasn't shot that many deer with his bow, and it was like what his expectation was, like the first 3-year-old or a decent 2.5-year comes out, he was going to shoot it if it came bow range. So we did have a lot of deer that some deer I'd seen, like a pocket, like, dude, spend some time here, and he almost sealed the deal. So it is definitely a team aspect, and you have to have the right mindset, because that in the same general area that I actually, if anyone's listening to the podcast, like I did send one on that first trip, and that general hub was just a lot of deer there, and there was a lot of deer that I let walk by that he would have shot. And there was one night where I caught one of those bucks working some does towards him. We were probably, I don't know, 300-400 yards apart, and there was a text message saying, like, dude, shooter coming your way. Like, there was no doubt in mind he was going to shoot that deer, and it just didn't quite make it to him. So you have to be very open-minded with that, with a group of people, and be okay with it. And dude, it's public land, it's vast, there's a lot of deer in areas, and if I let a deer walk by me, my buddy goes and shoots it tomorrow, like, I'm pumped. Like, that's your goal. It's all individual, like, goal oriented. Now if my buddy's preaching this big game, like, oh, I'm only going to shoot this, and this, and then the next day they go back on that, it might get a little razzing, but I think it's fair.
Well, and that, I mean, to me, I feel like that group dynamic is like the hardest thing to, and it's funny because I just did that podcast with Hutchie talking about like our deer camp, and I feel like the Patreon camp is a lot like the kids camp that I have, because it's just like we're just pumped to shoot a deer. Like, doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be big, and you don't have to shoot like. But if you, I feel like at that camp, it's like if you pass a deer, if you decided not to shoot a deer, then that's when you're going to get razzed.
Oh, for sure.
Because like there's guys that have never shot a deer. There's guys, but there are guys who are very me oriented, or that they're, and I've talked to guys on the podcast, and guys that I've kind of like respect as hunters in real life, but they view like going out of state and coming home with nothing a failure. And it's like they're very successful and they're very driven, and if you like, if you set really, it's kind of like what I said about my season this year, but like if you set like really high goals, you try a lot harder, and if you miss just a little bit on a high goal, you still did pretty damn good. But if you say, well, I'm just going to shoot the first 2 does that come out, and then I'm going to go on to, you had a successful season, but did you really try your hardest or give it your best
challenge
effort?
yourself. Yeah.
And like, so for you going out of state, and that's like kind of, I want to get into that mindset of like, you've never been there before, right? So you don't really know what's on the property. And so these deer that you're passing or whatever, because they're not like what you want, they might be the biggest one on that piece of property. Maybe there was EHD. Maybe there was a whole other group of guys that were in there and killed every 180 within, a 5-mile radius. And so how do you, like, because for me, it's always about time. Like, it's a very much a time equation. like, do I have time to, like, it, like, I think that's probably like, there's like a math equation going on in my head that I don't even realize. That's like, okay, what are my odds of seeing another deer like this or bigger in the time that I have allotted, based on the preparation that I've put in, what I've seen in the time, you know, and it's not like, yeah, he's got weak twos, like his belly, like he doesn't have the rolls that I think a 4-year-old should have, like, you know what I mean? Like, those are the things that I'm assuming, and you're shaking your head, like that's what's going through your head because of our conversations.
Yeah.
But it's just like, and that's what we talked about before was like, wouldn't it make you happy to you know, to shoot something, to smile, to share that with your buddies, and this time it's your deer that you guys are having a beer around, you know?
Yeah, like that's, you bring some very valid points, because I think that goes through like everyone's mindset when they do like go in a new place. And all these public land pieces I've hunted out of state, I've never been back to. So it's like I've just been desperately seeking, like looking and trying to find, and that is like my mindset.
All these deer that you pass to give another year, you're like, I don't want to see them next year.
Yeah,
I'm done.
Yeah, exactly. Because the chances are so, just looking for the right pockets. Like I think anyone who hunts private pieces or public pieces, that there's spots that can continually reproduce. Like if your ceiling's 3.5, you know, I'm just using that as an easier example. It's really hard to get a turnover, because if you don't see the 4 or the 5-year-old deer, if I find 4 and 5-year-old deer, then that turnover, not every year, but it should kind of reload, you know. And that's, I've seen that in Michigan too. Like certain properties, the ceiling is 3.5, and I just kind of like, you know, don't spend as much time there. Just let the cameras do the work, and just you pray one year one of them make it. Well, very rarely do they make it, you know. But then you do find the pockets where it's like, holy cow, like these deer are not, there's turnover, like that's right. So I've been doing that same thing out of state, just trying to find that pocket. And it involves me being okay with doing a lot of walking and very little sitting. And Illinois, for example, hill country, never been down there. I put miles in the truck and miles walking, just looking for, you know, sign, tracks, seeing what kind of deer run the fields and private around, and kind of came to the conclusion that to shoot a 4-year-old buck there was going to be, you did something. Like that was a very rare thing, and I covered the wide, you know, right. Maybe a 3-year-old was more realistic. I've seen a few. Then, you know, going to Kansas, it was the same mindset. Hey, we have a group of 6 of us. We each got 2 guys per truck. That's 3 trucks. We are like strategically gonna like check these properties out, and you do have to have like a pretty good group that you can like trust the other guys, right? Like we have to have similar mindsets to how we like scout or what we see, because some people who maybe don't have much experience with being out of state could walk into a property like, that is the biggest scrape I've ever seen. That is the biggest rub I've ever seen in my life. There is a giant here. Well, there's a lot more to it than just that. So you do have to have that kind of experience with knowing how to break down properties. And so that's kind of what we do. Like we just do this wide net for 2 days, maybe 3 days, maybe it's 1 day, and just start crossing properties off or finding deer, seeing deer from the vehicle or scouting. And then that's when you slowly start, you know, kind of like, you know, honing in on what you want to see. And the problem was the first few days in Kansas, we saw some deer that were like for sure like shooters. Like that's what we want to shoot. We want to target these deer. So when the 2 and 3-year-old deer walked by, I felt like the odds of me seeing one of those deer was pretty high, and totally worth it in my opinion. Like if I go home with tag soup, that's fine, because I know they're here. Like that's the most important thing. Like I know that one is in this area or multiple. So if I got to ride it out, give it everything I got, and I don't, you know, succeed, that's fine. It still was, you know, a fun time.
So how did that trip play out as far as the first time you went down there?
Yeah, the first time I went down there, I ended up leaving like 2 a.m. in the morning, drove down. Another group of guys were there a little bit earlier. So first day of scouting would be Sunday. They had a whole day of scouting. I only had an afternoon. I dove into some pieces, did a lot of walking. Fast forward to Monday, we kind of all split up. Everyone was in camp by then. Full day of scouting Monday. I want to say I think we walked 10.2 miles. Plus, I think I drove. I checked out like 6 different pieces in in a range of probably 30 miles, maybe from one point to other, maybe a little more. Just kind of like as we went, we worked down. And
so what does that day of scouting look like? You know, do you have your stand on your back and your bow, or are you like, I'm not, there's no way I'm setting up in here, so I'm going to leave all my stuff? Like, what does it look like, and like, what are you looking for? Like, what are the factors that you're saying, okay, this is good property, this isn't?
So Sunday when I arrived in Kansas, or the general area we were staying, when I scouted, I did have my stand or my backpack and my stuff, you know, ready, bow in hand. Like if I found something good, I was going to set up. I did not find what I was looking for, so I did not set up. Monday, because I had a partner, it was 2 of us per truck, I kind of take the approach of, we got to find 2 spots, so let's just walk around their bows kind of a thing, because I've had it happen way too many times in the past where potential opportunities without a bow in my hand while I'm walking around the woods. So that's how that went. And the thought process was in my head, I got to get this other guy, find him a spot first, because he's got less experience. Like I want him to have a good time. Not like, I know you've kind of given me crap. Oh, it's not good enough for me to let you shoot it. Like that's not really my mindset. It's literally like a team thing. Like, hey, your expectations are less than mine. You have a better odds of getting a shot on something just because of that. Like I'm kind of the psycho here. Like if I got to go drop you off somewhere, we find a really solid a play, I'll go walk for the rest of the afternoon until I see what I want. And then if that happens, like what we did, if we like, hey, we have a good spot for you, it's noon, 1 p.m., drop him off, and then I go and I'll start parking the truck. And then when I do that scouting, then I will have my pack on, you know, ready to rip if I find something. But then Monday, the thought process was we all kind of, you know, team meeting essentially Sunday night. What did you guys see today? What did I see? Where did you go? We always like kind of revamp, like, where were you? What are you thinking? And then it's like, okay, what are we going to do tomorrow? And then like, for example, me and my partner were like, we kind of want to check off these like spots that are kind of far away, or they may be small pieces. They may be that. Let's just like see if it's worth it. Are they overlooked? Is the hunting pressure high? Like, you know, just kind of do those things right away. So we kind of had our game plan, let everyone know what we were doing, and then the other 2 trucks, the same thing. And then you go execute it, right? And like when we're thinking about what properties we're going to see, we're looking, where's the wind direction? For example, I want to say maybe day 1, we had like a south-ish wind. So then it's like, okay, never step foot on these properties. Where's our access? Like, where can we park a truck on a road and walk it? And it's like, yep, if we had 6 properties, 4 of them, south wind's perfect. Like, we can sneak in from the north and work into the wind, scout it. Like, let's just cover it. And when you get to the property, sometimes you have to walk the entire property, right? For me, on a limited time, I only walk the whole property, or the majority of it, if I'm seeing what I want to see. If I don't see any sort of decent track size or buck sign in the first, let's say 500 yards, maybe 800, doing like a little loop, being smart with terrain and like how I want to work through it. Like I think you talked about it when you're in Tennessee. We've heard so much information. The guys are like, there should be a scrape right here from a terrain feature or whatever. And I walked that area and it's like ghost, or I don't see like fresh tracks. We had some rain, so like it was obvious to see that. Don't jump any deer. And it's like, all right, back to the truck. Let's go to the next one. So that's kind of how I break down that. And bows in hand, man, because you never know. And if you have that wind in your favor, you can really sneak around, you know, pretty effectively.
And so when you're scouting, are you like speed scouting? Are you taking your time? Are you know, because again, like it goes back to that like truncated timetable. But I think about like what happened to us in Tennessee is like we basically snuck our way out onto this point, and the frickin' 130 stands up at 25 yards and explodes out of there. And then we didn't realize that it was a peninsula. We thought it was a land bridge. So next thing you know, the sucker's swimming across the water, and we're like, holy shit. So I know what you're talking about, and I can kind of put myself in that position of like how you're going through it. And that was it. We were doing that in the rain to be quiet. So I can see that, but we didn't have stands. We were like, well, I guess we should have a bow. Like, I think if we would have had a grunt call in a rangefinder, we would have been much better off.
Yeah, yeah. My bino harness is always on with that bow. So so speed scouting, I use that more on properties I have history with. So I do a lot of speed scouting in Michigan, and that is just based on, I know where the crossing trail is. I might know where they like to cross a road. I might know where they like to cross a creek. So I can slide in there, check, and look for tracks. Like DJ Riley, like he breaks that down great. I do the same thing. And it's nice refresher. So like for example, not this fall, but last fall, I did that exact thing. Did a speed scout, confirmed this giant track is in here, and saw some sign really close, and in and out, boom, a couple days later, shot that deer. So I can do that on properties I know. When I don't know the property, the only thing I do fast is if I'm like walking across the wide open field. Once I'm into cover, I will like, I'm always looking ahead, like, okay, if I walk around this, or, wind direction, those kind of things, terrain features, if you got some hills, how you can like just try to go undetected, because you never know when all of a sudden that hits you in the face. Like, I don't know, for some reason, the spidey senses go off occasionally, and it's like, boom, like okay, we cannot go any farther. And we did have a spot like that. We walked in there, and it was, we walked in from one edge and started working our way, and we're seeing some sign, and it was like, man, there's some big sign. Where are they? And all of a sudden we walked into the spot, and I was like, okay, what's going on here? Giant rub on a cedar. Okay, there's only one. Is there more? You start looking around, taking your time, and it's like, oh, there's a rub. Let's walk another 40 yards, and all of a sudden it's like, boom, 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 giant rubs all over. It's like, okay, we cannot go any farther. Like, if we come back to hunt this, you need to sneak in with a pack on and like go hunt. That's so you do have to have like, I'm not right every time. Like, I do bump deer, I do spook deer that are big, and you do live and learn on some of those things. But the more you do it, you do kind of get a feel for it, and you can be effective sneaking up on deer. Like, I had so many deer in bow range on the ground scouting this last 2 years that, I mean, even going back to Missouri, like, I had the same thing happen in Missouri. You can be effective. It gets a little Western, as you like to say, but you can have good opportunities. You can increase your opportunity by doing that, because you only have limited time.
It wouldn't be my podcast if I didn't like point out the fact that it's like, well, you killed one deer in 15 years. Like, how effective is this?
Yeah.
But,
yeah. What's the standard? Am I just trying to kill deer? Or
I could have killed him, but he wasn't.
No. I could have shot at him.
Yeah.
I learned that from you. You shoot at him.
And you learned that.
I learned that too. Yeah, I did. I learned that with recurve too this year.
Yeah, I want to get into that, but right back to that whole standards thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you're going around and you're scouting. So you said we were at like Monday.
Yep.
And you guys were scouting around.
Yeah. So Monday was a big day. Like, we got soaked, lost the release. My thumb button went in a crick. It was a good day, but we did have, speaking of like sneaking around, I think we had 6 different bucks in bow range where we felt like we could have made a shot on it if we needed to. They were smaller, little 6s, little 8 spikes. I'll give you some credit. They were probably about average of what you got here on the wall. But yeah, it was really cool. Like, bucks bedded with does, groups of deer. You just slowly work through, and they're moving around because of the rain. And you kind of make a little play, a little loop, and get within bow range. So it was really, like, after that, we're like, okay, this ground game is definitely an opportunity here. So going into Tuesday, we did the same thing Monday. What did everyone find? Part of the group, Drew, which we just did a podcast about his success in Kansas. He found a really good area right away that day, and he had actually set a stand up or a saddle platform up to hunt that following morning. And then me and his brother, who we were together all week, we had a good game plan. I was like, we need to, get a vantage point on this, hillside, and like kind of overlook this nastiness. There was sign around. We had seen deer, all that stuff. Like, we just need to get on this ridge, glass in the morning, and then kind of work our way down, just kind of use the sight advantage and just like make sure we're not missing something. That's kind of the thought. So Tuesday morning came around, we did that exact thing, got in there early, got our vantage points. And I want to say we had deer in bow range kind of like just right on the ground there, a couple smaller bucks, 1.5 oldish bucks. And I went to go make a little loop to start playing down this ridge, and I saw a hunter like 800 yards away. And I do want to bring this up. So like, hunting pressure is like a legit thing. Like, a lot of guys always, how many trucks is too many trucks? Like, what's the pressure like? And that's one thing I kind of struggle with. Like, if I walk into an area and it's like, oh, there's boot tracks, I will be kind of quick to turn around and go somewhere else, just because that's not what I'm looking for. I deal with property lines and hunters in Michigan. Like, if I'm gonna go out of state, I kind of want to be like the only dude kind of around, right? So I think I kind of default to like, okay, someone's already hunted this, I'm out of here. Which I think, how many times we hunt the same tree or the same area and still see deer. So like that's, you kind of got to find your own place. But anyways, I had a plan to work down this ridge for most of the day and just kind of glass into some of these pockets, and just like we seen bucks with those the day before, so like maybe we get lucky. Saw him standing out there. It was like 800 yards away probably, and he looked like the biggest black blob that stuck out to me so quick. And I saw him with a bare eye first, and I was like, "There's a dude buying him up," and he was wearing just like real tree camo, the really dark, like woods. I don't know what your experience is, but he stuck out really bad to me, and I could not believe the amount of deer I watched him like bump like that. He wasn't looking. So anyone who's looking at camo, take that into consideration. I think if you're in the opener states, maybe have a lighter, less blotchy, because when I came back, I made a point when I found my buddy to see where he was, and I was like, "Hey, stand up," and he seemed to blend in a little better, just have a more open pattern. So one little tidbit. I don't know how much deer can see the black blobs, but that was just my thing. So anyways, on the way over there, this is on Tuesday morning, probably like 9:30-ish. Been late for 2 hours. I texted him and said, "Hey, we're not gonna be able to do what we want to do because there's a guy already coming this way. I'm gonna work back towards you and we'll kind of come up with a game plan." Well, shortly after that, he's like, "Shooter buck." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, across the road, I see him with a doe." So then the game's on, right? We have a buck located. Let's make a stalk on this thing, or like try to slide in there. And it was super thick. So we did that same thing. We kind of had a game plan, thought to our best of our knowledge of looking at onyx and not having stepped foot in this property, what we can do. We kind of slid around, and I talk all about this on my podcast, but essentially dove into this little spot, and we're standing there like, holy rubs. Like, look at all these rubs, like just on these tag elders. And I looked at him and said, "Dude, we need to this is good." Because we just walked, 10 miles the day before, plus a few miles on that Monday. Like, this is like the most concentrated sign. Like, at this point, we could tell what a fresh rub looked like. Like sometimes it's hard, like, tree types and all that stuff. But like by that day, I'd seen enough rubs. I was like, these are like within days. And I looked over at him and then looked back, and I was actually going to go grab my binos, because I do a lot of this too. I'll have glass in front of me to see. And then as I'm like reaching, boom, he stands up at like 64 yards. And I was like, "Oh, that's what I'm here in Kansas for right there."
And you said, "I know you spotted him. I know this is your deer, but I'm shooting."
I'm shooting. Yeah, actually, no, that's not how that went. But fortunately for me, I was standing like a little hump. So he was, below me by about 10 inches. And I remember looking at him like, I said, "He's right there." And he didn't believe me. And I was like, "No, he's like right there." And I was like, "Do you have a shot?" He's like, "No, I don't have a shot. I can just see his head and neck." And I was like, "Well, I can see his vitals." I was like, "It's far. Like, that's over 50 yards. Are you comfortable shooting that?" He's like, I've shot that far at tack before." And I kind of looked at him and I said, "If he lets me put an arrow on my bow, lets me range him, pull back," because I was like standing like the wrong feet posture. Like, I was like directly facing him, my hips were the wrong way. So like I had to turn my hips and everything. I'm like, if he lets me do all that, I'll shoot at him. And so yeah, sure enough, he's just standing there. At this time, we didn't really know why he was standing there. We're like, couldn't only see him. He was with a doe, so that's why. And the sun was perfect. Like, this is one thing I remembered from this encounter was, if you can sneak through somewhere and have that sun at your back, that helps. Because I don't think he really saw us, because he literally let me. I mean, I'm in thick stuff, up to my waist or a little taller, but turn my hips, put an arrow on the rest, range find him. Kind of struggled to range find him, so it took me a little bit. 64 yards, finally got him. Pulled back, hit my anchor. My buddy even said that. He's like, "You took a long time to shoot." I was like, "Well, yeah, it's like, I wanted to, if I'm going to do this, doof." And he turned and went right alongside him. And yeah, that was on day 2, I guess, or on a Tuesday. So yeah, a giant 10 point. What I was in Kansas for, and I just missed them.
And then, but other people had killed in your camp, right? It was a pretty successful camp.
Yeah, so we had one other guy killed. He ended up wounding a buck on that Tuesday morning as well. 5-yard shot, hit him just alongside him. It was a fiasco. We tracked him for 2 miles of blood that night. We waited full 12 hours. Tracking dog came in 2 miles with the tracking dog, so 4 miles total. Never found the deer. He actually went to a spot on Wednesday to hunt that deer. Wednesday he spent all day tracking the deer. He ended up shooting a deer Thursday morning. So he was in deer, same thing, but he ended up killing a buck on Thursday morning looking for the first deer he hit, but did find him again. So yeah, and then our guy shot at a deer. So we launched some arrows, like kind of like the Patreon camp. Seems like you get a lot of arrows for them, and they don't always connect.
Yeah, well, I mean, hell, in Tennessee, Brad shot 2, missed 1.
Yeah.
2, I don't know. He shot. He was like almost out of arrows. I killed 1. Eric missed twice.
Yeah.
Like we were.
It's a good time, man.
Shooters gonna
shoot. And that's my mindset too. Like I mean, I'm sure some people will be like, "Holy crap, 64 yards. That's really far." I do lean towards like I will take shots. Now if they're in thick cover or like I don't have a clear shot, like I passed the deer. I did not shoot at a deer this year because I was full draw and he was 20 yards moving with a doe, and I could not get him to stop without having stuff in the way. So like I won't force a shot in that aspect, but farther open shots I will take. Now, like some guys ask me, "Would you shoot a doe that far?" No. Like I would not shoot at a doe that far. I mean, maybe if I was starving, yes, but I do practice out to range and shoot my bow a lot. So like I feel like I've done my part in that way. And if you would have asked me when I told my buddy if he lets me do all this, I'm gonna get a shot off, I'd be like, "There's not a chance. Like there's no way he's gonna let us do all this." But he did, and I did take the shot, and I mean I felt like I executed the shot great. He just shooting a little too big of a Lincoln log, and if I had that Raven, he probably would have been done. But
So you come home.
So you want me to finish out how many deer I kept seeing after that on different properties?
Yeah, how you just they weren't big enough.
It was
somebody
awesome
else's
trip.
trophy.
No, I seen other shooter bucks
I know
sneaking around.
They were somebody else's.
Oh, somebody else's, yes.
Not
I mean,
yours.
I just say doing that same philosophy of sneaking into places. I got within 70 yards of another shooter to me, so I feel like he was 4 years old. Multiple other deer walked by, past quite a few 3-year-old deer, probably 3, I believe. One was broken, half his rack was gone, so I feel like that was I don't really know if I want to, I don't know how many guys would shoot a half. Would you shoot a half rack 3-year-old 8-point?
It depends.
Yeah, like I worried because I kind of I had that same dilemma happen to me in Michigan this year, where a buck I have history with broke hole one beam off. I was like, I'm not gonna shoot him, and I went to go hunt a different deer, and he came in, and I was like, that's the deer I was full drawn at. Didn't shoot him at 20 yards. I'm like, I'm still shooting him because he's 4 and he's giant, even though he's missing everything after his brow tine on one side.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I've thought about it because I've seen pictures of guys shooting them and like blah blah blah. And I mean, I guess it's like the same difference. Like my father-in-law's got one behind his house that's freaking. It's got one giant spike, and I don't know if it was like injured or if it's broke off. Can't really tell that great from the pictures. And that's the dominant buck out there. I mean, his right side is huge, but it's just a spike on the one side. And it's like, so what's the difference between shooting that buck and one that's broke off? The one that
exactly.
And so I don't know. And I saw like a couple years ago, like Brandon Egan killed like everywhere, and he killed like this giant buck in Michigan, but the right side was broke off, but it was like the mass on it was incredible. I mean, it was like a 6-year-old deer.
And it's like, how did you break that?
Yeah.
Like, that's a yeah.
But and people were giving him shit, and he's like, I'm not hunting the antlers, I'm hunting the age class.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the same thing. Like, I'm just filling the freezer. You can't eat the antlers. Like, I mean, there's all of these different rationales to like, why would you do that? But I mean, he won against a deer that he wanted to kill, and I think that's the same thing. Like, if I was in that situation, like your shoes, like, are we just being vain because we're like, well, he won't look as good on the wall? But if you're truthfully want to just kill that age class buck, then why wouldn't you shoot him?
And that's what happened to me with that 4.5-year-old 8-point. Like, I had seen him a couple times. I was hunting him, and then all of a sudden, boom! I seen him one morning working back into a bedding area with a doe. And I'm like, he's missing half his rack, and I was sad. I was like, oh gosh. And then 2 or 3 days later, he comes by at 20 yards, and I saw him working does, and man, I was losing my mind. I was like, that deer's giant, full, mature deer. Like, I mean, I feel like a 4.5-year-old body wise, they're a step above a 3-year-old. So like, it's apparent. And I pulled my bow back because I went from not caring that he was missing part of his rack to like, I'm shooting the biggest buck in here, and he's that old. So yeah, I like it because every year I seem to kind of get face new things and like have things come up. It's like, how am I gonna, like, how am I feel like how I handle situations really like dictates how I am as a hunter. And I think a lot of guys have to come to terms with like what that is. And I think everyone knows where you're at. You're like, I'm out here to have a good time and shoot some stuff. Like that's your thing. And I think I feel like just got to be healthy in whatever avenue you choose, because I want everyone to just keep hunting year in and year out. I don't want people getting burned out and be like, oh, I hunted really hard. Back in 10 years ago, I was really into it. It's like, no, stay into it. Like, I want this to just kind of be a lifelong thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I've had like, I think it was last year where I didn't shoot at more bucks than ever in my lifetime, and it was kind of like I teeter because like my thing I guess is the best way to put it is like validation. Like I was in the right spot for this, and it was just right spot, wrong deer type thing, and it's the angel on one side, the devil on the other, right? And so a lot of times you see like, okay, it's a buck. I mean, that even happened like this year in the UP. Like I was just saying, like I had a rifle in my hand, and like none of the kids wanted to get up, and it wasn't a deer that I could shoot anyways, because it was a 4-point, but it was like a 60-inch 4-point. I mean, so this deer right here is like a 2-year-old 6-point, and it was bigger than that. It was definitely a 2-year-old 4-point, and like body size, the antlers, and it's like, oh, there's just no brow tines, and I was just as excited, but it wasn't like, oh, I gotta kill this deer, or like if I could kill it, would I have killed it? Like, and that's another thing, because it's like maybe for the kids I would have, just for that, but I'm at the same point where like when I hunt with Eric out of state and he's like on bucks that he doesn't want to shoot, I'm the selfish one who's like, I want to drag a deer, I want to have a successful hunt, like as a camp, as us, this is what we did. And like where there was deer that like little tiny spikes or button bucks or does or whatever that I'm not shooting, but I'm like, you should have shot that little tiny 6-point so we could share the experience. So I'm more of that like experience type thing versus like I just want to have antlers on the wall.
Just want to walk around with a bow in my hand.
Or I just want to be like, yeah, you guys can't even believe the amount of 3-year-olds that I saw. Oh, I was covered up in 3-year-olds.
That'd be cool. Like have a notebook. Oh, look at how many 3-year-olds have you passed?
But like one of the things like last week or whatever you said, like it must have been on working class or something, where you're like, what are you going to go to his birthday party? Like, I feel like that's you, right?
Yeah, I felt like, I think it was Kurt or someone said that, and I was like, that's a great point, because that's kind of what I've been like, and maybe I gotta self-evaluate here a little bit. So yeah, we can kind of roll back into like the first trip. So it was a great hunt. Like I wasn't there as long as I would have liked to, but like towards the end of the trip, which I think a lot of guys run into this same thing, really was clicking. Like, okay, I'm understanding how deer are operating in specific properties and as a whole in this area, and found deer in spots, and it was like, I need to copy and paste what else looks like this on a map, or from an access perspective, can I do that? So the last day I hunted in the morning on a spot I'd found the day before, and great hunt, a couple does, a couple little bucks, had I'm assuming he was a 3.5-year-old 8-point, got to look at him like you just said, binos up, did the whole checklist thing. Yep, he's nice, but 40 yards, he worked across this thing perfect, and I didn't even grab my bow, because the night before I'd seen a deer much larger that I was in there after, and that was just kind of like, that was where my headspace was. So it was a great time. I went home, that day, left at noon, got home, and the whole time I'm driving home, like, I have to come back. Like, I need to get here before their gun season, because I was just like kind of hooked. Like, and that's the first time I'm away home that I've left anywhere out of state where I need to come back here. Like, this is cool, and I enjoy it. And I had it a little bit in Southern Illinois. The weather was just so hot with like the difference. Like, I'll probably be back to Southern Illinois. That was a lot of learning and fun in the hills, kind of like that experience. But this was a little different. I was like, I think I can make this. I think I can come back. And my schedule was lining up. So the scheming started as soon as I got home with the wife. And convinced her to let me go back. And it kind of just wasn't really sure the dates, but ended up going, had a second trip planned for, I got back home before Thanksgiving, did the Thanksgiving weekend, all that stuff. And then that following Sunday, I woke up real early in the morning. I think it was December 1st, I believe it was Sunday, and I headed back to Kansas.
And so one of the things I want to talk about going into that like second trip to Kansas is that it was like solo, like by yourself. And so have you hunted a lot by yourself? Have you hunted out of state by yourself? Are you like do you always hunt with your dad? Do you always hunt with a buddy? Or are you doing a lot of this stuff? And I guess it's weird because I guess it's all hunting, but I feel like when you go to a piece of private property, like you like know exactly where you're going, you know who's going to be there, like all that stuff. And I feel like there's something for me, like when I go to public land, even like if it's around home and like I'm going to walk, 3/4 of a mile from a trailhead or like whatever, and who knows what's in the parking lot, who knows, like, the one that, well, it was the place where I killed this deer, or very close to that anyway, I killed the one out there, and Frank and I walked in there, we were there the night before, come back the next day, he left his climber, we come back, there's nobody at the trailhead, we walk 3/4 of a mile back in there, and a guy whistles at us, like right where we were going, and it's like he had to be in there with a helicopter.
Yeah.
Or like, because it was like 3 miles to come in from the other way, and that's through like where the deer would be coming back from. So you never really know what's going on, and so like even when you're in there solo, there's a lot of things going through your head. It's not like, oh, I'm going to this grape stand, blah blah blah. So for do you hunt by yourself a lot, or is it?
Yeah, so like here in Michigan, a lot of solo hunts. And like you said, but they're private pieces. I know them. Like there's roads really close. I've hunted public, like we've talked about before. I've never had an issue like just parking somewhere randomly and just walking by myself. So even when I hunted out of state with my dad, it was always get him a spot first, and then I go look for my spot. So very comfortable doing those things, which I think a lot of guys are. But there was a couple things that are very like important, like kind of a checklist in my head. Do I have cell phone service? Because that is one thing I'm kind of always a little like leery of. Southern Illinois, I walked a lot by myself, like miles from the truck, and some steep terrains. Like, man, if I ever roll my ankle here, and
do you have an inReach or
no,
spot
I do not.
anything?
So that's one thing I do want to get. But when I was in Kansas, I had service, so I was like, sweet, like I do have enough, not great, but like enough. And the terrain was rugged, but there was nothing like scary, like, oh, I slip on this rock, I am going down in that water, or anything like that. So like those are things I do think about but no, I have never hunted out of state by myself. I've always went with my dad or with buddies. And we've always, if we're going with dad, you share one truck with 2 guys, so you always were within decent driving distance from each other. So this was the first time I did that, and something I've wanted to do for a long time, and got the truck kind of ready for it, and did all these things. And yeah, how I envisioned it going by myself is about how it went. And I really enjoy hunting with a group of guys, but something about doing that by myself, I really enjoyed that too.
Yeah, I talked about that. I don't know if it was like when I was in Kansas or like since, but it's, there's like that, you got to find the hunting partner that you want. But like one of the things that you always said was, you had already said a couple times, is like you have to find 2 spots instead. And so like depending on the wind or like whatever, like you might find one area that has like one good spot, and it's like, okay, well, are you going there or am I going there? Are we gonna like marginalize this? Are we gonna split it and both have crappy spots because we're not gonna Yeah. And like when I was in Kansas, it was like, and there was a couple guys there that I didn't really know that well, that we shared a house with, but they were hunting out of one truck, and I was just, I'm doing this. I'll call you guys later. It was very interesting because there was nobody to say like, hey, what do you think about this? And I felt like I learned a lot more like going in and doing that. And it's just like, it was like, I guess there was like nobody else to blame. Like it was like, do I really want to set up on this, or like, do I really think, or like, do I need to go? Do I need to keep going? Do I need to find like?
I'm better that way. Like I do my scouting, that stuff. I feel like I'm good by myself. Like because of that. Because there's a big difference between just trying to get on deer versus like you're trying to find the biggest deer in the area. Like I've heard a lot of guys talk about that. And I do believe that. So when you're trying to like, I think if like me and you, for example, went out of state, whoever's truck we use would be like, hey, you're driving, and I could be like, hey, you want to check this section out all day? You can spend all day here. You'd be like, yeah, sure, drive me off. I'll go figure it out. Then I'd go my other spot. Like I feel like that might be a little like there's not as many guys that you would be like comfortable doing that. Like I wouldn't feel comfortable just dropping just anyone off on this huge section in the middle of nowhere and be like, hey, have a good hunt, see you tonight. So you do have to have the right guy to do that. So I always default to, if you're with me in a truck, like we're doing this together. Like I've been blessed. I feel like I've been blessed. I got a lot of great bucks in the wall. Like I do have goals and like things I want to go for, but I'm more just like, we're doing this as bow camp. Like this is kind of fun. And, but yes, it does take longer. You know, you got to find one area, you got to find two, and you're always thinking like, is this a property where we could both hunt this? Usually no. Like usually that's not the case. Like there's been a couple where it's like, yeah, I can hunt here and 600 yards that way I can set up, or maybe two guys in this big huge pinch. But it's difficult. But you do have to have the correct mindset. Like I think that's always a thing. And for me, I know I'm okay without filling a tag. So like the pressure is like way low.
Why do you buy one?
Because you got to support the locals. You want the deer to keep coming back. So.
So when you got out there, so when you get out there, was the plan to like go back to those places, or did you look at the map and say, this is how they were using it? Maybe because I had two guys, I didn't want to go over here. Yep. Or was it like all the other guys in camp were seeing a lot better deer over here and it lays out like this, so I'm going to go to where they were at? Like, what was your thought process?
That was my whole mindset going back, was I'm going to dive into these just a little bit more. And my property A was a spot where, so I knew I left about an hour and a half, 2 hours later than I had wanted, just because I couldn't sleep the night before. And I was like, I need to at least sleep, 2 or 3 hours. So I did that, left at like 4 a.m. So that kind of put me in like, I had to check in because I stayed at a camping spot, so I had to check in for that. So I'm like, okay, well I can hit this spot up. I know there's a tree. Worst case, I know there's a tree that I saw deer movement in general proximity to where I shot at that 10 point. So that was spot A, and then I was gonna hunt that night, and then I had a plan for the following morning to like B spot would be my like next day spot. Or maybe it was B or C, however you want to like. I had a couple ideas, just depending on what I saw. So A spot was one, then B spot for the next morning. Those are both areas I had seen shooter deer in. I plan on hunting that night. If I saw what I wanted to see, aka saw the buck or one I want to shoot, I'd spend more time. If not, I was going to go burn over to spot B the following morning. Same process. If I saw what I wanted to see, keep hunting. If not, go scout more. So I get there, spot A, trucks everywhere, like more trucks than I saw the first time I was there, and enough where I was like, I might walk into someone. Like this is a big area, but also limited space, kind of like where you could set a tree stand, or how the terrain was, or whatever that may be, and where they were parked and access versus that. So I was like, well, that's burned. Like that sucks. Like not going here. So then I was gonna go to spot B, but by the time I got there, I was really limited on time. So I didn't feel like I could get in there and get set up and have a decent hunt. So spot C was a spot where towards the end of our first trip, me and the buddy were going, and we started copy and pasting like where else looks like this, and sent him. I don't want to say like it was like my idea or anything, but like we just said, hey, I could drop you here. You can walk to that. You can have a hunt. I will quit. This is like an afternoon hunt. I'm going to go burn up and check these spots. And he went in there and had a pretty good hunt. Like he saw a deer. He said he seen one deer that was decent that he totally would have shot. And then said, it was in the one thing that stuck out to me was it was a really easy, quiet walk back in there. And it was pretty far from where the truck was parked. So when that happened, spot A was good. I'm like, well, I'm going to spot C because like he said it was easy to walk in there and I can just like get in there, and then the wind was like perfect for that pinch point that I was going to. So that's what I ended up doing. I ended up just going to spot C, and was my whole thought process was I had my backpack on. I thought I had enough time to get up into a tree. Wasn't sure what tree, wasn't sure where, but the way the wind was and everything, I was like, yep, I can do this. And man, when I started walking in there, fresh scrapes, lots of deer tracks, fresh rubs. And this is December 1st, right? So Kansas and some of these Midwest states, it's always talk about, later rut maybe, or weather, blah, blah. But for me, I see pretty decent like buck activity on scrapes and stuff. Like this morning, I had bucks on scrapes, like working them. So I still use that as an indicator. Even then, I was like, I'm looking for signs still. And yeah, I saw what I wanted to. And as I got closer to the pinch point I wanted to hunt, the sign just got better and better. And I was pretty excited. So I don't know if you want me to break into like my whole process of doing this, or any other questions for why I was like interested, I guess.
No, I mean, I just wanted to like, because we've had some guys in the Patreon group, and I've talked to some other guys who've gone out and done like solo hunts. Like some of them have gone to like Montana, some of them have gone on elk hunts, some of them have gone like to Iowa, and like the whole like solitude or not having to, so I just wanted to kind of like figure out like what your thought process was like going in there, kind of like what you were looking at. And so you had said like if you go in there and you see the buck that you want to kill, you're gonna spend more time there. What was that like? What was your thought process going out there on like, did your standards change, or were you like still like, I saw these 50s bucks, so that's what I want to shoot?
Yeah, so kind of funny you talked about being an influencer here in the beginning. I did listen to one of your episodes. It might have been your Tennessee episode on the way down and or over. And I was like, that sounded like a good time. Like that, I was really reminiscing on. I was like, good time seeing that. Eric was talking about what he was kind of looking for, and you were like normal, like I'm just doing it for the camp vibes, like shooting. And I kind of was, I wasn't really conflicted, but I was really, this year's been a crazy year for me from how big of deer I've been able to hunt in Michigan. There's going to be a future podcast that comes out and some of that. You kind of know what's going on. But so I really had that like moment of, okay, like it did not go the way I thought this year was going to go. And not saying I had bad hunts or anything like that, like still was very like enjoying myself. But I was like, okay, where am I? Like, I just had a deer that I'll probably never have a deer like that ever again, potentially to hunt in Michigan. It didn't go well. It didn't, and the story didn't end how you want it to end. Like, how do you recover from that kind of a thing? And I wasn't really beating myself up. I was like, man, I had a lot of really good solid opportunities on like really nice deer. Would that make me happy? And in the moment, they didn't. Like I said, I didn't even pick my bow up. So then as I was going down, I was like, the first like solid buck I see, like, and I don't know, like I'm not gonna like pass a deer, because sometimes you might let a deer slip by because you don't really know, like if it's in thick cover. I'm like, if I get a solid opportunity on a decent buck, I probably should take it. Like, it's December, it's this toy, and the whole time I was thinking, that 130s, 140. I was kind of more so basing on antler size at that point, just because it was like solo first, all this stuff. So it wasn't necessarily like you telling me that. It was something I was kind of going through, and we can kind of roll that back to like my recurve buck this year. I went into an area I was recurve hunting quite a bit, and I was hunting properties that one property had some big deer on it, like what we know about.
I just want to say, like, I had asked you, like not on a podcast.
Do my standards change?
Yeah. Yes. Are your standards going to change with the recurve? And you're like, no, absolutely not. No,
I believed it to my soul until a 130-inch, 3.5-year-old buck stepped out, and then it was like, I'm jacked. Like, and I think we've talked about that too. Like, you kind of know, and it was not really refreshing, but there was no. If I would have like not shot at that buck with my recurve, I'd have been like, you're stupid. Like, you had that excitement, you had that passion, you knew about this deer kind of, but you didn't really. Where I slipped into it wasn't like it's not like a really good spot. Like per se, there's deer there, but it's not like I knew there was a 5-year-old or anything like that. So it's kind of, there's no trail camera in proximity, strictly based on like I hunted one morning, scouted that area, and I was like, that tree right there, I could kill a deer with a recurve. 2 days later, found that morning, boom, and it was like, I can't pass this opportunity up because of the excitement and the buck fever and the passion that was there. And then I hit him and hit him good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is one of those things that is part of bow hunting, and that's what sucks. And I love that. I want to get back to the Kansas stuff too, but just because like I think like one of the ridiculous parts of like that story for like a normal human being would be that like you moved to that spot to shoot a deer, and if a doe would have came through, you were sending it all day long. But now you're like, this buck that's for anybody, like for me, would be a trophy, right? And I'm not saying that like because the 54-inch buck that I shot is the trophy, because it's with a recurve. But I'm just saying, if I had shot that deer with any weapon, I'd have been super jacked about it. And you're like, you know what? I came over here to shoot a deer, but I'm not really sure if I want like that. I think is why you're like you were conflicted.
It was very conflicting because if I had a compound in my hand, I wouldn't even pulled it off the hanger. Like I've gotten so. Like, it's such a mindset. Like, if you're going to pass deer and try to target bigger deer, you have to be, like, in the mindset of this is what I'm doing. Like, this or bust, kind of. And you eat tags. I went 5 years without shooting a buck with my bow, like, trying to learn this. And I feel like I finally, since 2017, I've finally, like, got to the point where I, like, can get in front of these deer that are 4-year-old and older. Or I think I shot a few 3.5-year-olds in there. But the last 5 years, I've been really focused on 4-year-old or older. And you're so just ingrained in that there's checklists that come into mind, like, okay, your body type, blah, 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 change the weapon. And it was, I don't know how to explain that. I was like, there was apparent that like, yep, my standards do change the recurve. And like you said, I was there. So there was a deer that was in that general area that would have qualified. Like I would shoot him with a compound, but there was no like zero confidence I was seeing that deer on this hunt. This was hunt this transition. There's deer here. I'll probably get a shot on a doe. Like that was like in and out, just trying to get that first, confirmed recurve kill. And yeah, that happened. And yeah, it was awesome. It was great. And you'll probably like this. So after that whole recurve debacle happened, I hit the deer bad, almost back of the head bad. I set a trail camera up in that area just to see if he still made it, whatever. I ended up sneaking up on him, and I put glass on him, was confident he was going to live. I got a bunch of trail cam pictures of that deer, and I have not went in there to hunt him again since, because I don't know if that will like taint the experience of it or what. I'm not really sure why, but my thought process was that's like the buck I'm going to kill with a recurve. So like I haven't been shooting my recurve a lot since like I hit that deer, then I missed a doe shortly after, so my confidence kind of was like I need to do something different equipment wise. But I haven't went back in there and hunted that deer, even though I had opportunities or could have. So it almost like I don't want to take away from that feeling and like how I felt in that moment, and I'm like good with it for the rest of the year. Now the question's gonna be, I'm sure a lot of people think, what if you see that deer next year? Will you shoot in your compound? Probably. But I'm also like, it'd be kind of cool to try to get him with a recurve next year.
Well, there's a couple things there. Like one, like that, I feel like is part of like what we're all chasing. It's like when the deer comes out and you're like, oh my God, you're like super jacked.
Yeah.
Right. But what I think is funny, and I didn't think about it until like all of our conversations like after the fact, and I've told you this before, is like, and I think, so I was driving to the UP when you were getting ready to go to Kansas. So I talked to Nate like all the way across the whole UP. But when he shoots his recurve, because he's like, man, you shoot that really good, but you shoot kind of funny. And he is so like rigid, like regimented, like everything has to be, there isn't like a real like flow. It's like robotic almost, because it's accurate and he shoots it really well. But in the moment, that becomes difficult when there's live animals in front of you.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I shoot instinctive, like three split finger, like pull back, do all that stuff. But man, I watch you shoot. I'm like, holy cow, what was that? Kind of a thing. And you do it again and again and again. I'm like, oh, hey, that really suits your style of shooting. But how do you, like, if I tried to shoot the way you shoot a trad bow, I would miss a lot, I'm pretty sure.
But Nate is like, it's like the bow starts here, and I
think of a pitcher, like a major league pitcher, like how they
gets into the windup.
Yep, or like you watch a quarterback. Like I threw a ball a lot growing up, very athletic. Like throwing a ball to me there's a couple ways to do it. Like I can be off the cuff, like playing football, throw sidearms, do those things. But when you're like in the process, your 3-step drop, you let her rip, and like I'm trying to dump that ball into that bucket. Like you got to be semi, not robotic, but like system. That's how I've always shot a recurve. Like it just naturally. I put my bow arm out, I pick my spot, pull back, wham, and I can shoot amazing groups, and in my yard when I can shoot enough. And I watch you shoot, and you're like, I hit the target. I'm like, what? You just hit the target? You're cool with it? But that is the perfect difference between how I approach things and how you approach things. We both find our success in different ways, and it's fun to like go back and forth with you because I'm like, I know I'm like 95% positive I know what I was doing wrong. So the next opportunity I get, I'm killing that deer. Like I figured the problem, like that's me, and now I'm gonna do my part by like practicing all off season, doing those things. So when the moment does come and I'm gonna execute it, you're just like, man, I'll be 4 foot off the ground and they come in at 18 yards, I'll just fling an arrow at it and I'll get them, kind of thing. If not, whatever, big deal, I'll shoot one tomorrow. Like I kind of got mentally, I'm like, I feel like I'm very strong mentally, but like my confidence got shaken with that hit and then that miss, and I'm like, okay, I know headspace wise, I gotta set the bow down and wait till next year. You're just like, dude, I'll miss 20 times in a row. I don't care.
Well, but I think that like I've said it before, like with a compound, like a miss is like devastating because you're like, it's not supposed to happen.
Yeah.
But like with the recurve or like with the trad bow, it's like we're doing it the hardest, one of the hardest ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so like if you miss and you don't shoot him in the back of the head, or the nose,
or the nose,
yeah, right. But then it's still a win, and the deer got to win, and you got to get your reps in, and it's like every time that I missed, which is a lot, I laughed, I reevaluated, like what can I do differently, or what went wrong there. Or what like went right, like the last one that I shot out with the recurve, like she kind of saw me a little bit, but she just ducked the arrow.
Yeah.
And she was taking a step when I shot, and I shot right over her back. She ducked, but like watching it back, like I'm so happy that she ducked because I'd have shot her right through the guts, and it would have been a bad deal. So I'm like, I was like, okay, well I can't do that. Like a shot that I would take with a compound, like I understand. Very much so that with the traditional bow, there is a level of accuracy that you have to attain, but the arrows are going so slow and they're live animals. And these old cats that I talk to, these guys that have grown up around it, they say you kind of just got to get an arrow in them and figure it out later.
Yeah.
So I understand that, but I would just as soon not shoot them in the guts. So like let's not do that.
So one thing I do want to ask you, because you don't shoot like point on or anything like that, you're instinctive like I am. When you're taking these shots at deer, is the arrow flying where you feel like you're aiming? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's what happened. So that's not what happened with the buck and the doe I shot at. My arrow did not hit anywhere close to where I was aiming with the buck. And I videotaped myself. It was a really cool video, like over the shoulder, kind of see my body. And my reaction was I like laughed. Like I was like, dude, I shot him in the back of the head. And first of all, how do you not die? Like you would think if you hit one in the back of the skull, just drop right there. So I'm just like laughing, like I can't believe I just did that. But then I was able to watch the video and like, oh my gosh, my anchor was hot garbage. Like my hand hit my anchor instead of my fletching. So like just boom. It was like I was probably like 8 feet off the ground. I was like sub 10 yards. Like how do you miss it by like that much? So I did have the same reaction, which I do think is like I don't ever want to take myself so serious where I get upset, but like you still gotta do the process. But then the doe, I did hit my anchor, did everything. I was like, dude, I set up in this. I was a hanging hunt on this little ridge. Came working through perfect 21 yards. Floop, arrow goes, and I was like a foot high, and so like that really shook my confidence. Now if I've had it where deer duck an arrow, and it's like, okay, hey, I was at least shooting where I wanted to shoot. I just the human or the animal reaction. This was different. It was like, oh my gosh, I need to go back to the drawing board a little bit. So that's why I asked you that, because I feel like every time I ask you, how'd your shot? I feel like shot felt great. Like you feel really good in the moment. So like you were very, there was just those other things. And I like how you bring up like it's hard. Like it's not supposed to happen. Like it's not a guarantee. Because for me, I kind of get sucked into, well, I am going to practice so much. I am going to, whatever equipment I do use, if that's my compound or my recurve, or if I got to kill something with a slingshot, which I've done. Like when I was a kid, I shot my slingshot so much. I told my dad, I was like, I'm killing a squirrel with a slingshot. He laughed at me. Dude, I would practice my slingshot, and then I'd kill a squirrel that year with it. Like, so like I always felt like I could, with my ability or work ethic, whatever, if all I need is the opportunity, I'm killing that thing. And that really shook me because I didn't quite get it. So it's kind of I'm sure other people probably have the same mindset as me. Like I still enjoy it, but I was like, oh, if it's a recurve, whatever, I just need them within 20 yards and I'll kill them. No, well, not the case for me. And I gotta remember that it's hard. Like it's hard to do that.
But look at these guys who are like great hunters and guys that hunt with the traditional equipment all the time, and it's like they're not just out there knocking them down every time. And like the one who comes in, whether you think he's a great hunter or whatever, but I think he's a very great like advocate for the sport and what he does, and he does a lot, is like Jason Samkoviak. But every time he shoots, he doesn't connect, and the guy shoots all the time, and so, and it took me a long time to get to the point where I was like quote unquote confident enough, because I knew but that it was gonna be hard, and like I don't want to wound the animal. And when you say like, oh, you shoot the target, like that's good enough, like I shoot good. And I mean we're both from the era, I feel like, of like when you grew up and you were pie plate accurate at 20 yards, and so like I'm better than pie plate accurate at 20 yards, but then at like 10, 15, like I can shoot a golf ball.
Yes.
And
I can testify to that. We've shot. I watched you shoot. I'm like, yeah, I was giving you a little bit of berries. But yeah, you are very proficient with your shots. Like, it's not like we all have buddies who like, man, I really don't think he should be hunting with a compound. I had a buddy that if he listens to this, I'm sorry, I'm not going to tell your name, but I was like, dude, maybe you need to hang the compound up and just get a crossbow. And I said, I'm not tracking any more deer for you until you get a crossbow. And so like there are people like that. By no means I ever think that with you, but it's refreshing for me to hear that, because that I just want the arrow to go where I'm looking, or like where I'm aiming. If the deer reacts, if that's part of bow hunting, like I can work through that. But when the arrow doesn't go where I'm wanting to go, it didn't ruin me, but I was like, what? Like I'm done. Like I just gotta hang it up and wait till next year.
Yeah, but like so the doe that I killed at the Patreon hunt, I missed her at 16 yards, 14 yards or something, and I was having an issue with my tether, and it made a bunch of noise, and like I forced a shot where I short armed it and like stuck my nose out, and the arrow like went and like went right over her back, and I was like, that was the dumbest thing that I've ever done. But it's the same way when I shot at that turkey, same thing, like I just try to force the shot, and so like as long as I go through like whatever the shot process that I have is, but as long as I'm having a good, like my only thing is like I've shot enough that I'm confident with like that 20 yards and in, or right around there, but just being able to pull up and shoot instinctively, but what I know for a fact messes up my shot is my release. And as long as I get a clean release, I'm perfectly fine with whatever happens, because I know that I don't have sights. I know that I don't shoot like point on. I know this is very classic, like the conversations that we've been having, but I'm having fun. Like if I make a good release and I shot an arrow at something, like that was freaking fun. Like that's all I wanted to do. Like not wounding it and whatever.
So all your trophy pictures of you with your hardest deer, Adam's never smiling. Well, let me tell you what, he smiles a lot before the picture's taken.
Oh yeah, certainly. Yeah.
I do like that because I think that the more you spend time, we all had to learn like when to pull our compound back and when to take the shot of the compound, right? That's a lot different with the recurve or whatever longbow. And the amount of stuff I learned with the buck I shot at and the doe I shot at from those things is really like good, like really good. Like, okay, there was an opportunity I could have shot my buck, but I thought it was maybe a little too thick, so I didn't really take the shot. So then like I was in kill mode, like I'm going to shoot this deer now, and then he kind of got close and like kind of got my wind, so he's like turning to leave, and I was in kill mode, obviously, like I'm killing this deer. He was within 15 yards of me for like, I don't know how long the video, 6 minutes maybe. And but I didn't, when I started my shot, it wasn't, I tried to like stop him in the shot sequence. So like there's all these little things you can learn, and like hearing you talk about like deer was at X range, 13 yards, 16 yards, or that buck was really close that you came walking through that you grazed in front of them, and you were, how high off the ground were you? We can talk about these things and like kind of put ourselves in these positions. And like I think as a whole, anyone who's on this journey, it's no different than like going deer camp. Kansas is a perfect example. What'd you guys see today? Kind of, talk about it, see what's going on, get a game plan. Next day we're all on deer. Well, that's because we all were unselfish and we talked about these things and help each other out. That same thing goes in the community of bow hunters, right? How do you shoot so good at 100 yards with your compound? I remember the first time I saw guys do that, I was like, how? Then you kind of dive in the rabbit hole. Then you talk to guys who are good at it. And you get these little tidbits of information. And the only reason why I shoot as good as I do is because of being a sponge and all those things. And if I go smash a buck, or a doe next year in my recurve, I'm going to know it's because, well, me and Adam have had a bunch of conversations and all these other guys who have talked about it. I set up on this height and I made sure that, the deer was positioned a certain way or whatever it may be, and I execute my shot the way my shot is. Because I think everyone's shot is different, but it helps and it's fun, and that's why I love hunting so much, just because of all the whole thing. The whole thing is so much fun.
Yeah, so let's go back, and I think it's a lot more fun, like when you're successful, when it and I don't. And that's like a strange statement, because I actually had that conversation with my daughter, right? She said, it feels really good, Dad, to kill a deer. And I said, well, I don't think you should say that. Like you're not a psychopath.
Yep.
But I'm like, you can say that like you're happy that you did, or like that you were, that we put in our work and we did this, but you can't be like, it feels really good to kill stuff. But like, again, I think that for me, it's always like about validation and all that stuff. And like, it is a double-edged sword, because this buck right here, I killed by myself and everybody was gone. And so like, we've had enough conversations that like, I'm all about the high five and the drag and all that stuff, and like recover my buck all by myself with nobody to call. Or, I called Frank and he told him, and I called John and he was like, he came out in like an hour to help me. But like in that, like after that moment, you're like, well, now it's over, and it's not even like now the work begins, because like that's all part of it, like whether you have a group of buddies or not. But like once you feel your tag, it's just kind of like, well, I think we love the hunt so much, and like the amount of doing stuff. Hell, you don't even shoot deer, you just go out there and do it a whole bunch.
Love it, man.
Chase them.
Tore up with it. Yeah.
So for you to go out there and like you did end up shooting a deer by yourself, so go into like that. So you went into this spot quiet.
Yes, the quiet access spot. So as I'm sneaking in there, see the fresh sign, like open scrapes, there's lots of deer sign, there's rubs, there's all these things. Not like giant rubs, but like you can tell deer were using this still actively. So I'm approaching the pinch point and had a couple ideas just from like looking on the map where I would have set up in a tree. And as I get there, it's very calm. So I, not being in the spot, I kind of took the approach like I'm going to really sneak in like in here and try to find a tree. So as I'm getting into this pinch, I'm, you know, looking ahead like, okay, there's one, there's a tree, there's possibly a tree. And, you know, you start looking like, okay, is there a deer trail? Is there something here? It's like, okay, I can see it. I can see deer trail here and here. Started hearing something that sounded like deer working in front of me, like sub 100 yards. I mean, it's calm. So then I was like, okay, I'm not going to climb a tree. The way the terrain was and the understory and all that stuff, I was very confident. I just, you know, stand next to a tree. I have cover. I can, you know, I can make this happen. So that's what I did. I got to actually probably one of the trees. Actually, if I had more time, I probably would have like worked through the pinch a little bit farther because I felt like I could have like snuck around it, but knew I didn't have time. So like if I wouldn't have heard anything, I probably would have set up in the same tree that I ended up, you know, ground hunting from. And it was a double tree. Great. I could have the tree like in front of me. I was essentially like my bow was like leaning against a tree, and I could see between the split of the tree down this pinch. And I had really good, like if you're in a saddle, really good strong side shots. Like I could shoot anywhere alongside me, and all the stuff that I was overlooking was my wind never blew towards it. I didn't walk anywhere near it. I did a big loop kind of. So I was like really like, I'm gonna see something, probably work through this pinch. Didn't know if it was gonna be does, didn't know if it was gonna be a buck I was gonna shoot, didn't know any of that, but just okay, it's gonna be apparent if I need to come back tomorrow. So I got all set up and heard some stuff, and I think it might have been squirrels. I'm not 100% sure, but 20 minutes later, 25, 30, somewhere in there, I started hearing deer off to my left, and I was like, okay, I can hear deer there. So I'm, you know, I've been hyper focused the whole time because I've only had like an hour of like light. By the time I picked the tree and like did my little thing, cleared some leaves out, you know, broke a couple branches around me, and I was like, you know, I had an hour before, you know, maybe 45 minutes before, like shooting light was maybe an hour, but it was a very overcast day, so I didn't know if I was gonna have the full hour. Anyways, sitting there and coming about 75 yards away, I catch this buck coming down this like little ridge and terrain feature, and I saw a rack that appeared to be past his ears and tall, and I was like, oh, there he is. And I was already sitting there with a bow in my hand, so I was standing, saw the deer, and I was like, I'm gonna shoot him if he gives me a shot. Like I'm on the ground, I just got here, like middle of nowhere kind of a thing, and got down on my knees and just waited for him. And he worked through the pinch. I never could really see him because of the cover was so thick, and like a little bit of rolling topography. But I watched him work a scrape, could hear it, which was so cool. I love that when a buck comes in, you know, leaves going, made a rub. And at that point in time, he's coming through the pinch from one direction, and this group of does end up coming from another direction. So I like deer kind of working the pinch in front of me, like ideal situation here. So I'm just being patient and just waiting. And I had arranged a spot. There was a trail that I could kind of see, which I assumed was like a deer trail, 22 yards, and another one at 34 yards. And I had like one opening that was probably like 6 feet wide that I could shoot through on the 34 yard. And it was kind of like a finger ridge. So at one point it was 34 yards, but then when the finger ridge turned and came to like my big opening, it was like 44 yards to 46, from what I could tell. So I kind of told myself, I was like, man, if one's there, I would much rather take a 34 yard shot than a 44 yard shot. So sure enough, this buck comes through, and I thought he was a 9 or a 10. Like I was convinced he had, I put the binos up on him one time going through, and I was like, okay, he's a 9 point. So like, boom, he's in the 130s. Like that was what I told myself, like the first deer, and I could not see his body. So like me and you have talked about this. How do you know? Well, I'm like, well, if I'm elevated and I have time to put binos on, I'm very confident that I could like dissect a deer's body and have a really good idea. All I ever saw this deer was like chest, like above the shoulders up until he was in shooting range. And I was like, I literally told myself, like, he's probably 4. Like that looked like dark rack, kind of like he's the buck in this area because he's just like being super aggressive. So I was like kill mode, like we talked about earlier with the recurve. Like I'm killing this deer. So he finally works his way, pops up on a ridge, and kind of exposes himself. But of course, it would have been great to take a shot there, but I only could see like neck and butt. I did not have a good shot. So I position myself, get ready. He comes working through perfect. Pull back 34 yards. And I had to like kind of stop him a little. And he stopped and sent an arrow. And 10 feet off the rest, I hit a branch. And like a pretty good branch. No idea how I never saw this branch, but I hit it. hit that branch. Arrow was going hard left, hit another branch, and actually deflected back right towards the deer. And I would have missed him by probably 10 feet, but I only missed him by about 2 feet. Arrow goes flying past him. And there's deer all around me. Like I want to say there's probably like 5 or 6 like doe. There might have been a little bucks. I think I heard like a faint grunt kind of with those deer. Maybe the buck, I'm not sure. But it was kind of like I shot the arrow and no one knew what had happened. This deer kind of took 3 bounds and stopped at 45 yards and just like stood there and looked. And all the does were like, what the heck was that? And then they kind of went doing their own thing. So I'm like, wow, I can't believe I hit that. I like laughed. I'm like, well, obviously I didn't see that branch, you know. And he kind of started working around and he started going back away from the pinch point, but then started curving around a little waterway. And I had ranged that spot earlier and it was like 55 yards or 55 yards. And he was going over there. I'm like, man, if he gives me a shot, I'll shoot him at 55, because that whole week I didn't hunt much when I came back from my first trip, because I knew I was going back to Kansas. So I was like, brownie points, I won't hunt, you know, that kind of a thing. But I can shoot from my garage on my target, and it's like 57 yards. And like I was just shooting my bow like every day. So when I first set up, I was like, I'll take a shot across there. It's wide open if I get a shot, but hopefully I don't think I will. We'll end up getting a shot. So he comes walking across that on that little ridge and ranged him, put my pin, pulled back, shot, and just like wish I had it on film. It was the prettiest shot I think I've ever made. Setting wise, deer sitting there, didn't move an inch, boom, smoked him. And he took off, head down, and I lost my mind. Like I threw my bow on the ground. I fist pumped. I was so pumped because like I think it was this kind of a combination of like those 15 years of doing this. This is my second, you know, third deer I'd ever shot at. I've only shot at a buck, you know, I think I missed 2 deer before. So this would have been my 4th shot at a deer out of state. And I finally was like, boom. And it was this pure like excitement, like what you live for as a bow hunter. But I am saying all that because I did make a mistake by getting too amped. I called my dad instantly because I always call him, and I was just loud. I smoked him like holy cow. I saw him run away hard, tail tucked, like I hit him right where I wanted to, and started looking for my first arrow while I'm talking to him loud as can be. And long story short, I pretty sure I spooked that deer by being loud, because I waited like 40 minutes or 35 minutes before I went and looked for blood. But I was loud, and come to find out there was a bed at 90 yards. And then I tracked for another like 350 total yards and lost blood. And went from like huge piles of blood, what you want to see, like looked foamy, to no deer 2 hours later. So like that whole roller coaster of emotions was going through me. And I'm like, did I not see what I thought I saw? What happened? You know, those kind of things. And I ended up waiting the next day and got a dog tracker to come in there and ended up finding the deer. But
well, just before you go get the dog tracker, I think one thing that like I want to ask you, like, things of like, because for everything that I am, like with a happy-go-lucky hunter, right? I'm like a freaking pessimist when I shoot a deer. If I don't see him fall, I'm like, I hit him bad, like, you know. And so, and I've hit enough of them bad, you know, there you don't get them, or you know, like, because you know, you if you shoot enough deer, like the deer that don't react, or like that run off with their tail down, they just like walk over there and fall over.
yes,
And you're like, that's the best thing.
Yes.
And then once you've had that happen enough times, like it doesn't matter, like the next shot you could freaking pinwheel them, and if that doesn't happen, you're like, oh my, at least for me,
yes,
I'm like, what did I do wrong? Like it looked great, you know. Like I'm like such a pessimist. So
this deer did the whole like boom, hear the diaphragm pop, like man, I smoked him, like turned tail. He made like a noise too when it hit him, and he just like was running on a straight line, like running through deadfall, like, you know, just making loud, and all of a sudden the noise stopped. I'm like, oh, he just poof, tipped over right there, baby, let's go.
yeah, no, I'm not.
Well, that's what that feeling is, what I was experiencing, and I'm just saying this for other guys who I've killed. I think that was like I don't even want to know how many deer I think I've shot with a bow. Quite a few. I think I'm close to maybe like 35 or 40 deer, somewhere in there. So I feel like I've had a pretty good like experience of shooting deer with a bow. And I've had deer I haven't found. Like I'm not perfect by any means, but I was convinced that that's what I experienced. And your mental state and adrenaline, even someone like me who's been, shot deer and done all this stuff, like I just want to say that for anyone who's new, that turned into a fiasco because of that one careless kind of like let myself go moment.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things, but like why I wanted to say that is like, cause I'm like such a pessimist that if that would have happened to me, and kind of it did, like so I shot at a deer in Kansas, missed him right off of the get-go, and he just stood there looking at me, and I loaded another arrow and shot him. So I think there's something about that, these deer in Kansas, like Michigan guys, like we're really stealthy, or these deer are really dumb. There's like one of these two things, like maybe. So, but I didn't get a pasture. I only found meat like at where I saw this deer enter the woods. And then I found like a little bit of sprayed blood. In hindsight, my deer turned left. If it would have turned right, which is the way that I was looking, because that's where the spray was, but that's where the entry hole was. I didn't think about that in hindsight. It would have come right back to me, and I would have seen him run down this drainage. So he had to go the other way. But in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, I'm not finding any blood.
Oh, yeah.
Like, so then I called the guys that were out there, and then when we came back, we found him like no problem. But if that was me, and it was like at night, and that same situation, like whether it was my fault for hooting and hollering, or it was a bad shot or whatever, like what was your mindset when you got back to the truck? Because you're out there solo now. Like I would have been like just ate up, like it would have like crushed me.
So I was on the phone with my dad the whole time, which was really good. I think if you have someone that you can talk to through that, and like I said, I found my first arrow. It took a while, got to the blood, and I'm like sending pictures to him, like, dude, look at this. This is what you want to see. Like, there's spray, there's this huge pile of blood. I'm like, he's gonna be laying like right here. And then I didn't I should have confirmed the next day, but I didn't, because it kind of like all happened really quick with the dog tracker. But I was like, I think he bedded right here. And my dad's like, what? And I was like, he's like, well, if you hit him where you think you hit him, there's no way. And I had turned my Onyx tracker, or whatever device you want to use, or app, on, and I remember looking at that, and I was like, I'm 90 yards from where I hit him. And I was like, okay, well, maybe he's just dead right over there. And I can't see very far. Like, this is just the way the terrain is, and, thick understory and that stuff. Like, I can't see. So I'm, like, looking at my light, and I can see blood. And I essentially, when I found that spot where I thought there was a lot of blood, I was like, okay, in my brain, I'm like, okay, what's going on? Did I spook him? And I have a buddy that deer tracks and stuff, and I was like, man, if I would have spooked him, I feel like I should have been able to hear him because it's so calm. I didn't hear nothing. So then my dad talked. He's like, well, just chill out for a little bit. So I kind of just like went really slow and just kept following blood, because I was like, this is not dark blood. It's what you think you should see. And it took me like 2 hours to go like 350 yards. Like I was going really slow. I still had my dad on the phone, and he's like, what does it look like? I'm like, well, I'm like following the blood. It's there. Like I'm going through some like grassy or shrubby stuff. You can see it. And he's like, well, how often are you finding the blood? I'm like, well, it's very spread out. So like he's running. So like for me, I've been enough tracks where it's a fiasco. If it's a deer, you got blood very consistently walking. Like that's like, I get pretty concerned when I've gone pretty far. This was like every like 15 feet I was finding like blood. So like, well, he's running this whole time. So I kind of like told my dad, I was like, I'm going to go until I can't find any blood anymore, or if he starts walking, or if he or whatever, if I hear him, then I'll back out. I mean, the nice thing about public land hunting, giant. So my thought process was, there's no private anywhere near me. If I do bump him a second time, 2 hours later, then obviously I did not hit him where I thought I hit him. Like if he's laid down twice, it's liver or guts or some sort of mix. But like what I was seeing wasn't telling me. So I'm headspace wise, I'm like perplexed. Like I don't understand. And then as I'm tracking it, my dad's like, you had to have spooked him. Like he probably ran over there and you heard him stop, and then you started hooting and hollering, and he left while you're doing that. So that's why we kind of came to that conclusion. So I got to the point where I just couldn't find blood. Like that next 15 yards, no blood. And I did like these, and I waited. It was like 2.5 hours probably from when I shot last. And I just pulled up the map, and I was like, okay, I went like 350 yards approximately. Maybe it was like closer to 400. And what am I gonna do? And I was like, well, I got nowhere to be. Like, this is the first night. I don't need to rush it. I was like, I'll go check a couple little like terrain features that would like a deer could potentially be. Did a little loop, came back, and was like, I gotta go back to the truck. I need to wait till morning, but I'm gonna try to find a tracking dog, and just use the resources. Like my buddy, the first trip had used a tracking dog, so I reached out to him, and he recommended a guy, and he could get there the next day. So that's kind of where I went. And when I got to the truck, I was like, "You've got to be kidding me!" Like you kind of like it was a two like shot wise, constantly should have taken the shot, and I was like, no, I made the perfect shot like in my mind. So like I said earlier, like if the arrow goes where I want to, the recurve, I can live with what happens after that. That shot on that deer was executed to like exact hit right where I wanted to. So for me, I was like, yeah, I'll take that shot. If I get the same shot tomorrow, I'm taking it, kind of a thing. But what happened? I don't get it. And long story short, when he came, the guy couldn't get there until like 4 o'clock the next day, but it was cold, so I wasn't too worried about meat. And this whole time I'm tracking this deer, coyotes are going insane. Like, they shot the deer, like, when I was celebrating, I could hear coyotes going off, and I was like, yeah, there's a lot of coyotes. And the reason why, after I did my loop, I forgot to say this, when I lost blood, I could hear one lone coyote barking like a dog. And I kept telling my dad, I was like, can you hear that? He's like, yeah, I can hear it. I was like, it feels like it's within 250 yards of me. I was like, I'm gonna go. I looked at the map, and there's a terrain feature where I thought I could hear the coyote barking. I'm like, I'm just gonna sneak over there and either scare the coyote or maybe see where he is, and maybe he's on my deer. I don't know. Couldn't find the coyote. Didn't hear him anymore. So I got back to the truck and was like, man, I know that I should have kept my cool, done those things. But by the time the dog trainer got back the next day, I scouted a bunch that next morning. I almost went in there to look, but I was like, I don't want to mess up the trail anymore, all that stuff. And yeah, from the time we got on first blood to find my buck, it only took the dog like 11 minutes. And it went 190 yards with no blood. From where I lost blood, I stuck an arrow in the ground to where he found it was 190 yards, and I backtracked it that night and could not find any blood. So he just death run to that spot. And coyote's got a little bit of the one hind quarter, which was really sad. It must have been the coyote I heard barking. But yeah, I got my first buck, and how I felt was the guy I never met before, right? I was like kind of like, I'm fortunate enough to know like a really good friend of mine is a dog tracker. So like every time we do trial tracks or anything like that, it's like my buddy. Like you talk about this, he's my buddy. So like when we find a deer together, it's like, yeah, this guy was never met him before, but he's a passionate guy, I could tell, and we celebrated. And he offered to help me get the deer out of there, and I told him no. I was like, I want to do this by myself. I want to kind of enjoy this moment, do all those things, and yeah, I did, and it was really, really cool.
So getting that deer out of there yourself, first one that you did, right? Mm-hmm. So what did you do well? What lessons did you learn? What would you do differently?
So I will talk about age and score a little bit, because that's what a lot of guys know me from. So I didn't put a tape on him, but if he had good brow tines, he'd probably be like really close to 130. He was at 28 points, so who knows why I thought 10 or 9. Was definitely off on that. And a 3.5-year-old buck, so like I'm pretty confident in that. Great deer. I mean, it was really cool. I don't regret doing that. But self-evaluating this year, and who knows what I'll do next year. Will I shoot a 3.5-year-old in Kansas next year, or Illinois, or Missouri, wherever I find myself? I don't know. But I do want to say that there was something to be said about just letting my like emotions kind of like dictate what I did in that second trip. And I feel really good. Like I feel accomplished. I feel like, hey, I checked that list. Do I wish it was a bigger deer? No. Do I wish I would have done it 5 years ago? No. I think it all played out exactly how it should have played out in my journey, I guess, as a bow hunter.
So I guess I want to know about the pack out and all that stuff, but yes. I think when you're talking about score and you're talking about like, that's what the people know you for, and I give you a lot of shit about it. But like, so, I've seen it from lots of people who like have a bad season or a bad string of years, and they're like, I just needed to shoot something, to kind of reinvigorate that. And like sometimes that means like guys that go out and just shoot something without a camera and just hunt for the pure hunt of this. Yep. Sometimes it's guys just need to shoot something by themselves and soak in the moment, or whatever. Do you think that now that you're this big fancy podcast guy that it's like, oh, I'm supposed to be killing stuff? Because I mean, I've talked to other people who were like, not necessarily from like a podcast standpoint, but like I know like the first year that I like got cameras and like we were gonna do a podcast, and like I was way less accomplished of a hunter as I am now. I mean, I didn't know half the stuff that I know now, but like I was like, I'm gonna get a camera, I'm gonna film, and then I got all this time to hunt, and we're gonna hunt, it's gonna be great. And I missed or wounded like 9 deer or something. Like it was just the kind of like this year as far as like flinging arrows, but like I wasn't killing anything. I was just missing, just bonehead shots, and it was like I was pressing really hard. And it didn't necessarily have anything to do like with the podcast, but it was like, I'm gonna do this, and then it was like, the hell you are, like you're not gonna do anything like that.
Yep.
So did you feel any kind of way about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've done the podcast for like a year and a half, I think. So I came out of like a season where I didn't shoot a deer with my bow or a gun. I don't think I even shot a buck in 22. Yeah, I don't think I shot anything. So like my first year of podcast is like, yeah, I'm doing this podcast. I didn't shoot nothing last year. So, but I didn't let that really deter me. Like that's not new news to me. And then 23 was just fire, right? I shot 3 bucks last year. It was awesome. And then this year, I guess for me, I don't ever want to let.
If you shot 3 bucks and you've never shot a buck out of state, like
with a gun, I shot my 3rd buck with a gun out of state. So this is my first archery kill.
Okay. Because I was like,
no. This is my first archery kill
like, hold
out
up.
of state. Like I said, Iowa. I've shot
Yeah.
a couple there. So with that year was awesome, and then so for me, when I was in Kansas, I never once thought like, hey, this is for the podcast. I mean, me and you laugh about this quite a bit. Like, I don't ever want the podcast or video in or anything like that to dictate how I enjoy my season or how I hunt. And like me and you probably, our shortcoming is we are in a lot of cool circumstances, and we could do some pretty cool content with those circumstances, but like not even like on our radar. Like we're not even like, I'm not wired that way. So never once did I think with the recurve in my hand that I need to kill this deer because it's for the podcast, or go to Kansas and I shot that deer because, man, it would be really cool to take, ground hunted public land headline. Like that's not how I ever want to be. And any of my close friends or anyone who is listening to this, if I ever do have any sort of inclination that's the path I'm going, please rattle my cage and give me some crap like Adam does. So I don't want that. So no, I didn't. I know guys talk about the pressure and all that stuff, but I always have had the mindset, even when I started the podcast, that anyone who can listen to me or follows along, I guess I can smell BS, and like I can listen to someone and be like, this dude doesn't really know what he's talking about. I always want my actions and my words to kind of like say, hey, this guy, like you had Jake on a couple weeks ago. I met Jake at the Mobile Hunters Expo, him and his dad, and I talked to him for like 45 minutes straight. Never met him, just like said hey, and it was apparent that them dudes knew what they were talking about. And so that's always like what I wanted to be, and I would love to listen and learn. I don't ever feel like I've arrived. So no, I did not. I'm pretty confident that I did not make that decision based on podcasting. Yeah. Now, if if someone's like, you shoot a buck, you get a bunch of money, then maybe that would be. But I'm never going to be in that position.
If there's any takers,
yeah. Anyone wants to pay me to go shoot a 3-year-old buck somewhere? We can do something. But no. But the pack out. So I wanted to do that for a while. I've been to some pretty cool places, and I've seen guys, and talked about that and the solo kind of aspect of that. And I doing that there was like, it's pretty far from the truck. Like, there's no way I'm dragging this thing by myself. And so I just had some game bags. I have the Mystery Ranch Pop-Up 28, which, gosh, like they have that 30 now. My buddy's got that. What a way better backpack than the Pop-Up 28.
So that's how I met Josh Mapes, is he had a Pop-Up 28, and I had the Trophy Line pack, and he was looking for a Trophy Line pack. And I said, well, you want to do a trade? And I got the 28, and I was like, you want to trade back? This thing sucks.
Like, yeah, like it's a decent, like
and guys love it.
Yeah, the bag itself is fine, but there's nothing on the outside to strap anything. So like, I rocked that backpack until this year. After the Patreon hunt or whatever, I saw one rocking the Latitude stuff, and I was like, I'm pretty intrigued by that. So I went and bought one, and yeah, it's super nice, but it doesn't have an internal frame. So I love the internal frame, like the way I carry tree stands with it or my saddle stuff, all that great. But the whole like not strapping anything to the outside, just like they really missed it. But it's the 30 I think has that now, if I believe. I think my buddy's got it. But anyway, so that pack was like, this is just gonna become my pack out pack. Or if I ever go out west, maybe I'll use it. But now I don't even know if I want to do that because I've seen the other ones. But anyway, so I just had some game bags that I've had for a long time, and when I came back in there, I have a headlamp, and I brought like one of those nice Milwaukee lights because I was like, well, maybe I'm gonna want like some light when I do this, and I never ended up using it, just extra weight. But it was really good. I did the gutless method, so fortunately, it just was gonna do European mount because
it was too small as a 3-year-old.
It was too small, yeah, probably. Well, I have out of state. I have like certain criteria in my head, like I'm not gonna shoulder mount unless it's a certain size.
Well, you've never shot one except for this one.
I
so
shot some in Iowa that European mounted too, but
so they didn't even meet your standard.
They didn't meet. No, it's a pretty high standard. Let's just say that. So, but that's just me personally, and I do like European mounts. Like seeing your mounts, like I have a conflicting thing. Like some of my really nice bucks are on the wall, and I'm like, you look cool. Like this is cool. Or like buddies come over, they just like stare at this. And you're like, yeah, this is my can. I'm like, let me see that thing. And you hand it to me, and I can like check out the cool inline point, and like I kind of geek out on that stuff. So I do really like European mounts. Like I am a sucker for those. So that was easy. I could just cut right down the back, gutless method, how you skin it, did all that, and then I quartered out the rear legs, and then I hung them on some branches, just to get them up off the ground, because I didn't want to. That was the one thing. Like I was like, I don't want a bunch of dirt and crap on this, so I had not brought like a tarp or anything like that. So I was in my head, I was like, well, I feel like I could like roll the hide one way, take off that quarter, hang it, do that back strap, and then then don't skin the other half until I'm ready to do that. That worked really well. I was actually kind of like, for never doing like I mean, I skinned some bears like in Wyoming and watched them do that. So once I saw like, if you can do a bear, I can do a whitetail kind of a thing. And I shot a doe earlier this year with my bow, and I took care of her the gutless method. So I kind of was like, I want to try it. Super nice. Like I don't know why. It was close to the house, so like I mean, I had her quarter up and in the freezer in no time. But I did it that way, and I was like, well, this is kind of fun. Like I like not having to gut them. So I did that, and it was great. It worked really well. And I had game bags, so like I deboned it all there, and just took my time and got everything deboned and put in game bags and strapped in the backpack and made the nice long hike back to the truck.
Body size, like versus, I mean, I guess if you're only killing 4-year-old deer, then yeah, they're huge. But like, so body size on this deer, because the one I killed in Kansas was huge. It was like a horse.
Yeah, I would say this is kind of like a smaller deer. I think I've talked about a lot, like how you're trying to judge deer off trail cam pictures and all these things. If you don't have like a history, sometimes it can be pretty difficult because each deer is so different. And I would say his rack looks a lot bigger on his body than what it really is. Like that, so that was like a benefit to this pack out. And one rear quarter was mostly 8 up, so I didn't get like anything off of that. So weight wise, I would put him as like your stereotypical 3-year-old buck in Michigan. Probably is, I don't know, like live weight's probably like hovering around 200 pounds, I would say, maybe give or take a little bit. I know it can drastically be different, but I put this buck probably, he was sub 200, probably live weight, I would say, really close to it, but he was not bigger than me. I didn't get that feel at all. So I was able to get all that meat deboned in that pack, and it was pretty heavy. Like, I mean, I could have done more if I had a whole rear leg, that wasn't 8. But yeah, it was a good amount, but it wasn't no behemoth of a deer. I wasn't like, dang, this dude messed me up. And you got to think too, so it was December, so there was no fat on this deer. Like he was just meat. And when I peeled his back straps off, I didn't even have to like skin any fat off him. Like he had nothing. So he was definitely a rutting buck and probably lost a percentage of his weight for that too. But yeah, it was pretty cool. It was a nice little hike back. I was like, man, elk. I kind of put elk hunting in perspective. I was like, man, if I had to go up a mountain, like you've packed some elk out, so I'm like, yeah, I'm glad he's. I don't have to do multiple trips because it would have been a long night.
Yeah, that's the only gutless method that I've done is on elk, and I mean for me that our trip out west, that was worth the price of admission, like getting to quarter up those elk and cut them up. Now this year was different because we had 100 guys and they were all chiefs.
Oh,
there's a lot of chiefs, not a lot of Indians. So it was interesting. But so
I enjoyed that moment of being with that, like shooting that deer and doing that all by myself, because it's been other than shooting a doe, maybe like sometimes if I shoot a doe and depending where it is, like I can drag this doe 200 yards by myself and get a truck into an ag field or something like that, so I can extract those kind of more ninja like and in and out. So like I've had those experiences, but this was a little different, pretty far away from home, checked a bunch of things off the bucket list kind of a thing, and it was emotional, but not in like a. Sometimes like I've cried when I shot a deer before, like you just tears of joy. It wasn't that. It was more of like, this is what I do. Like this is me. Like if this is like what I kind of live for to an extent. Like this is what all this hard work, all those miles of scouting, all this stuff, all kind of came down into that thing, and it really like validified like where I stand in that stuff. And it was fun to slow down in that moment and enjoy that in that way. But if I had, I think I talked to Brian about this in my podcast when we went over this hunt. I was like, if you held a gun to my head and I had to pick solo hunt the rest of your life or hunt with buddies the rest of your life, I would pick hunt with your buddies the rest of my life every time. I would. Even though they both are drastically different, I enjoyed them both the same. That would be like, me personally, I really like doing it with friends.
So, I know we've gone over like your like standards and like the feelings and in the moment and all of that sort of stuff. But like, did this change your perspective at all on that? Simply because like we're sitting here telling this story and you're saying that that moment, that experience like solidified who you are as a person and as a hunter and all of those things. And it's like my thoughts are like my philosophy, and like it all it's situational because just because of like how it all works out. But all of those deer that you didn't shoot, or that like they're all in some way, shape, or form like an untold story. Mm-hmm. And now you have like this little token, this here on the wall, even if it's not a full body mount or a full video or any of this stuff, but you have a story that is real.
Yeah, tangible thing from that. Yeah. I kind of go back and forth on that a little bit, because I think I've told you, or we've talked about this, like going out of state somewhere you've never been, you're at a disadvantage, especially for like you have a limited amount of time there. Maybe if you look on social media or if you look on YouTube and all these things, it seems like, man, if you just got to go to Kansas, you just got to go to Iowa, you just got to go to Missouri, you're going to kill a buck. Well, there's a whole lot of people who don't kill anything, and you are at a big disadvantage with that. It's a grind. It's a process. And I think the biggest takeaway I took from that Kansas deer and the recurve buck this year was that I'm not going to talk myself out of the moment, which I feel like I've done a really good job. When I was younger, I did. Like when you first pass a 2-year-old deer, you're pretty amped and you have to like kind of talk yourself through that. Then you start passing 3-year-old deer. Like I think the first sit out this year, I had a really nice buck that I passed at 7 yards. Like he was in front of me and he worked to 7 yards, worked a scrape, and I was really excited. Like that was a lot of fun, but I never had the inclination to like grab my bow off the hanger. And it's different because in Michigan you have trail cameras, you have history of all this stuff I've worked really hard at, and like this goal. So like I feel like my Michigan standard, especially on like the history and that stuff, I feel like I'm still very like okay with that. Passing the 3-year-olds and doing that kind of a thing. And then going out of state, like the problem is if I go back to Kansas, if we hunt that general area, like I have a very good idea of what the ceiling is, or, I'm not saying there's booners running around, but there are like mature deer running around. So like my mindset is always going to be, those are the deer I'm going to target. Like if I know like the last day on the first trip when this buck comes off this ridge and works his bottom right to me, that deer's, about the same size, maybe a little bigger than the one I ended up killing. I was like, that's a 3.5-year-old deer. I don't want to shoot him. So like I didn't convince myself to shoot him. I didn't convince myself not to. Fast forward to the second trip, it's like, man, my reaction was shooter deer. He's this big. I'm gonna like ride this high out and see what happens. And then I end up sealing the deal on that deer. I think maybe that's gonna kind of be my approach more into these like drop in hunts or anything like that. Like don't be so pigeonholed into a mindset that enjoy the experience, but like also I don't I don't need to shoot another deer next year in Kansas. I don't have to do that. I could go another 15 years without shooting a buck out of state. As long as I get to go out of state and like chase that adventure, that's enough for me. But now, if I like what could happen is like I really want to like do what you did in your Kansas buck last year, like decoy set up. He comes all in bristled up. I had a buddy who did that in Kansas this year. He got all tore up. He shot some awesome deer, bigger deer than I've shot. He's had great success in Missouri and in Michigan, and he shot a deer like a 2-year-old buck at like 12 yards on the ground with a decoy. He's like, I lost my mind. So I want to make sure, like hearing stories about you and like that, I don't want to rob myself from that experience if I'm already in that like state. And maybe that will happen again next year. Maybe it won't happen. I don't really know. Maybe I'll have a recurve in my hand in the Patreon hunt and be tested with, I don't want to like say it like in a negative way. What if a 1.5-year-old buck walks by me and I'm at this group of guys like you say, like, am I going to not shoot it? I would never dream of shooting a deer like that the past 10 years or 15 years, but am I going to like rob that moment? And I think it's a struggle for me, or not really a struggle, but something I really think about a lot, because I feel like I can relate to like your perspective. I can relate to a lot of my buddies' perspective and all that stuff. But I think at the end of the day, it's got to be just where I settle, like what I want to do. I pass deer because Nate Rozeveld wants to pass deer. I, do those things because it's what I would like to do. It's not because I got Adam peer pressure me to do something or, those kind of things. But I also want to make sure that I'm a good example, because I think, one thing I've respected about you and your podcast was you're doing this like it's, you're doing this because you have a passion for it, but you also want to help as many people as you can and let people know like, hey, I'm the world's worst bow hunter and I can figure this stuff out. Every once in a while, one of my arrows does connect, or whatever it may be, or I can do these things. So it's a very powerful thing to get, because I think the majority of guys are coming from that space where they might not have been as blessed as I have. So I got to kind of find that balance, and I want to be able to still help people and still do that and make sure that that's my focus. And I think I can do that without having to be the guy that kills that deer. So like you've talked about, like a lot of guys haven't been on blood trails, haven't been on these things. Like when we talked about that earlier, when we did the podcast together earlier, really made me think a lot. And then I went to Patreon. I had a very like open mindset to that. And you were right. There's a lot of guys that haven't had that experience, that really don't have like that person that can guide them, or that like thing to do, because that could be time frame, adult onset hunter, whatever that may be. And I already have some ideas of how I can maybe help, or show, because it's not because I'm so cool. It's because I've been like cracked out on this for so long, that there's stuff that I know that if I can point a guy in the right direction, he can go shoot his first deer. That is a huge success. And you hear guys talk about that like quite a bit. And I feel like I could probably do a better job of, having maybe people shoot some does in some properties, or do this thing. But it's like last couple of years I've had some brother-in-laws that have been hunting, so I've been putting a lot of effort into those. It's like, well, they've started to have some success, so like I really enjoy that part of it too, and try to like build that. But then also the back of my mind is like, well, in order to kill one of these 4-year-old or 5-year-old bucks, it takes a lot. Like maybe other guys it's easier to do. For me, I have to like really like almost like fixate on it to get it. So I'm trying to find that balance where I don't have to like fixate on it so much, so I can enjoy some of this other stuff, because I feel like I've been so cracked out on it for so long. I kind of missed some of these, like, dude, like 3 years ago, hey, come to this Patreon hunt in this area of the state you've never been to before, in Michigan, that's not known for like big deer, and come spend a couple nights and hang out with some guys in like in a stereotypical time of year where I can have capitalized on like really big deer. And I didn't even like question. I was like, heck yeah, let's do this. And I enjoyed it, and it was totally worth it. So I was kind of in my headspace going in, we still got some season left, but right now, no bucks killed in Michigan, and still got some good hunts left. But yeah, that's right. That's where I stand.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love having these conversations with you, because I don't want to say like we're like diametrically opposed. but it's just, and you know, when you were talking about that, like how like you were growing up and all that stuff, like I grew up hunting just like my daughter and those kids. Like we'll just go up to the UP and shoot some does. Like
Yeah.
the amount of bucks that I've seen up there with a rifle in my hand is minuscule compared to the amount of the amount of bucks that I've seen with a bow in my hand, and on public land. I mean, it's like if you look around, like all the deer that are here, that are hanging up or whatever, all the bigger ones are from public, and all the little ones are from private.
Yeah.
And it's because, like we never saw bucks, we never got to shoot bucks. Like there was only ever, like when we stopped shooting, like it is like what people fear, right? It is like all we ever saw was spikes and 4 points, and then as soon as a deer had enough points to shoot, you shot it. There was no like when you're talking about those pockets, nothing ever got through. So I just grew up shooting does, like just shooting deer, and I think that may play into like why, like when there's a legal buck in front of me now, like I'm just like, let's do it.
Death certificate, please.
You know. So, but I love having these conversations and like it being like really like relatable from the standpoint of like how you got there, and then having like some of those hunts like out of state in a much different perspective, because like I'm going out of state to like kill a deer, like not to wander around. And but I don't have like I have like very
can I
small
ask you a
standards.
question?
Yeah.
I'll kind of flip it on you a little bit.
Yeah.
You don't have any desire to try to kill like a Pope and Young with your bow, like not necessarily like go all like it's bust if I don't kill one, but I feel like you
Here in Michigan, or
yeah, here in Michigan, because I feel like you have enough. I've been around you enough, and like you've got a lot of seat time in here. I think you could go find one and hunt one in a matter of a couple of years, go seal the deal, even with your trad bow. Like I feel like when you go into the year like goal wise, because we talked about that at the beginning. It's like, what's your goal? That's how I started to get where I was. I was like, man, I think it's attainable. Like first of all, I think your goals have to be like attainable, no matter how crazy they may seem. But they still has to like. I feel like all these goals I put on myself, there is a percentage of like it could very well happen. For you, are you have any desire to like maybe like, oh, I'm not gonna I shot, I almost bucked out with my trad bow this year, a year and a half old bucks. I might hold out for 2-year-old next year, and then like slowly like climb the ladder a little bit in that regard.
So I think that's like a very difficult thing for me to do. I think if I were to do that, I think I would have to like sacrifice some of the other things that I do. So like we talk about like, oh, what are we gonna do this year? Blah 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 blah. Like it's like, okay, well I'm going to ATA, I'm going to Harrisburg. Last year I went to Montana, Colorado, Tennessee, Michigan, doing the tack stuff. And I feel like the areas that I'm familiar with in hunting, they're holding like this caliber of buck. Like this is like the top. Like there's 3-year-old ceiling, right?
Yeah.
And so that buck out there is like 105, 110 or something like that. That buck was a 3-year-old. He's 187 pounds dressed.
Yeah.
So like, and those are the areas that I'm like familiar with. So I think, and I know lots of guys do it, but I think it would take for me to go out and like really start to look at other properties and like try and dive in, and then try to figure out like who else is hunting them, what's the pressure like, what's everything going on. So I think like the time commitment. So then like where's the breaking point, right?
Yep.
And so like if I'm cool, and again, like if we go back to that whole, and I think maybe you have like a different idea just based on like where you hunt and like what a 2-year-old looks like versus what a 2-year-old looks like on public, like at the Patreon hunt or
yes.
whatever.
Yes.
We're talking about a little bit of different. I don't think we're talking Pope and Young. I think we're talking like 80-inch buck.
Yes.
So that shooting that, I think that's where I'm at right now. Is like 2.5s, like whatever. Like with my trad bow, like this year, I'm just flaking them,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, you found some success, so that's why you always hear guys like, how many 2.5-year-old or year-and-a-half-old bucks got to like stack up in this box? Because there's a lot of guys in Michigan who have shot tons of bucks. Like I've seen the garages, I've seen them, and they just have like all these racks just like piled up in the corner. It's like, well, like how much more of those you got to kill like before you're happy? And like obviously you have some awesome deer and you're adding to that goal, but it's like always like at what point in time is there not like 5 years from now you're like, maybe I'll change it a little bit.
Well, but it isn't that. I think
streaky.
no, I don't think that it's that either. I think it's that I have to like start to get on them more consistently.
Okay.
Because I don't think that I'm there right now. I think where I'm at right now is like there's just and again, I'm putting in the work to find deer, not the deer. And so then when I find deer and then a buck walks by, then I have to make that decision. But I also don't know what else is out there. So I'm like, how does this make me feel right now? And that kind of goes back into that like out of state stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So like, and even like this year, like I had a spot that had a whole bunch of bucks, and there was like there was like probably 2 3-year-olds and a couple 2.5s, and I think there was like 7 or 8 bucks on the camera. But I just couldn't hunt there until like after the Patreon hunt, and after the Patreon hunt, all the acorns had pretty much
moved.
Yeah, and so those deer, it changed things dramatically.
That's a really good point that you're saying that, because I'm desperately seeking the older age class because of probably where I hunt, the permission pieces I may have, or when I go out of state. It's like I don't care, I'm just looking. So I've been hyper focused on that for so long that it just comes on perspective, right? Like what you want to be. And I would totally respect you. Like I love it because you're like, yeah, this is what I'm doing. I'm just like looking for deer, and he comes by, like it validates. That's the amount of effort I put into was to find deer, and a validation. Boom, I'm taking advantage of this opportunity, because yeah, you do have to. I mean, you talk to anyone, I think they would say the same thing. Like to consistently get on those older deer, there's less of them, so you have to put in that different kind of effort. I don't want to say effort, because I think you have to put an effort just to find deer. It's it's a process, and it takes longer.
Yeah, I think that's what I mean. Is like I think I have to like go and look at a different property. Like I have to do the out of state thing, and that's what I've been kind of trying to do.
Yeah.
But I have to go in and say, okay, now what's going to happen here? Like, am I going to do this, or am I going to stop? Like, and so like if I just write off every property that I've ever hunted because there's not like bigger deer, and then just start to travel all over, but then that takes up like all this other time. So then it's like, where am I going to be like confident or whatever in,
Yeah, just wait. You'll find one, and you'll be hooked on it, probably.
Yeah, maybe.
Like when that does happen, but you never know. It's an experience. So.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I appreciate you letting me do this.
Yeah,
man. This is a good time.
Yeah. So next time, you'll have to clean up your house.
Yeah.
And I'll come over there.
Yes.
So for everybody, where can they follow along with Mr. Nate Rozeveld?
Yeah, man. So just do Michigan Wild Podcast. It's part of the Sportsman's Empire. I've been doing it for like 1.5 years. Instagram, Michigan Wild Pod. Don't forget the pod then. Apparently, so quick. I took over the podcast. I was already started. So unbeknownst to me, there was a Michigan Wild on Instagram. So you gotta be careful which one you follow. They're both great. I don't know how much the other guy does anything, but yeah, Michigan Wild Pod on Instagram. And then just check out Michigan Wild anywhere you listen to podcasts. And that's about it. I don't really have a Facebook yet. Maybe I'll get a Facebook page for it, but yeah, go follow me on Instagram. There's some cool reels on there.
Awesome, man. Thanks.